My son-in-law framed me for a crime I did not commit and sent me to prison for 5 years, just to steal the company I built with my own hands. Every single month for 5 years he tried to visit me, not because he cared, but because he wanted to see if I was broken yet, and every single month I refused to give him the satisfaction. On the day of my release, I finally executed the plan I had been refining in the dark for 1,825 days. By the time the sun set that day, he was screaming and falling to his knees in the dirty snow, begging for a mercy I no longer possessed. Before I continue this story, please like and subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from. The heavy steel gate of the Illinois State Correctional Center slammed shut behind me with a final metallic thud that echoed in the freezing morning air. It was a sound I had dreamed of hearing for 5 years, but now that it was actually happening, I did not feel joy. I felt cold. The wind cut through my thin gray jacket like a knife made of ice. I was 72 years old, and all I had to my name was a clear plastic bag containing a change of clothes, a cheap watch, and $40 in cash. I stood there on the cracked concrete sidewalk, letting the biting wind numb my face. I took a deep breath. The air tasted of diesel fumes and winter frost, but it also tasted of freedom. My name is Otis King. For 40 years, I was the man who built Chicago. My hands, which are now rough and scarred from prison labor, once laid the foundations for skyscrapers and community centers. I started as a laborer mixing concrete until my back felt like it was breaking, and I ended up as the CEO of King Construction, one of the biggest black-owned contracting firms in the state. I had respect, I had a legacy, I had a family, and then I had nothing. I looked across the desolate parking lot expecting to see an empty road. I had no one coming for me. My wife Clara had passed away 10 years ago, God rest her soul. My daughter Jasmine had stopped taking my calls 3 months after the trial. I expected to walk to the bus stop alone, but I was not alone. Parked right in front of the gate, illegally occupying the space reserved for official vehicles, was a car that looked like a spaceship that had landed in a graveyard. It was a Porsche Panamera, jet black and polished to a mirror shine that reflected the gray sky. Leaning against it with his arms crossed over a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my lawyer's entire fee was Bradley Pierce, my son-in-law, the man who stole my life. He looked older than the last time I saw him in the courtroom. His hair was perfectly styled, and his teeth were blindingly white, but there were lines of stress around his eyes that even expensive creams could not hide. He was 38 years old, and he looked like he owned the world. He saw me and straightened up, flashing that shark-like smile that used to fool me into thinking he was a good man. "Otis," he called out, his voice smooth and confident, carrying over the wind. "You look terrible. Prison food didn't agree with you, I guess." I tightened my grip on my plastic bag. I wanted to walk over there and wipe that smile off his face with my fist. I wanted to scream at him for the lies he told the jury about me stealing from my own employee pension fund. I wanted to ask him how he slept at night knowing he had framed an old man just to take the CEO chair. But I did not do any of that. I had learned patience in my cell. I had learned that anger is a fire that burns you down while calculation is the ice that preserves you. I walked toward him slowly, letting my limp show a little more than necessary. I wanted him to see a broken old man. I wanted him to underestimate me. "Bradley," I said, my voice raspy from years of not speaking much. I didn't expect a welcome committee. He laughed, a short, dry sound that lacked any warmth. "Don't flatter yourself, old man. I am not here to welcome you. I am here to ensure you disappear properly." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a thick white envelope. He held it out to me with the tips of his gloved fingers, as if he was afraid he might catch poverty from my skin. "There is $5,000 cash in here," he said, "and a one-way bus ticket to Florida. It leaves in 2 hours from the downtown station. It is a nice retirement community, Otis. Sunshine, palm trees. You will like it." I looked at the envelope, but I did not take it. "Why?" I asked. "Why are you doing this, Bradley? You already took the company. You took the house. You took my reputation. Why are you here?" He sighed dramatically and stepped closer, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Because of Jasmine. She is fragile, Otis. These past 5 years have been hard on her. The shame of having a father who is a convicted felon nearly destroyed her social standing. We are finally in a good place. We are moving in high circles now. The last thing she needs is her criminal father showing up on our doorstep begging for a place to stay. Jasmine knows I didn't do it," I said quietly, though a seed of doubt had been planted in my heart years ago. "Does she?" Bradley asked, tilting his head. Or does she know what the court proved? That you were senile, that you were greedy, that you stole from the very workers you claim to protect. She hates you, Otis. She cried when she signed the restraining order, but she signed it all the same. She does not want to see you, ever. The pain of those words hit me harder than the cold wind. Jasmine was my little girl. I had built that company for her. I had brought Bradley in as the CFO because I wanted to leave her in good hands. I treated him like the son I never had. I taught him the business. I invited him to Sunday dinners. And he repaid me by forging my signature on withdrawal slips and paying off witnesses to say I was losing my mind. I looked at the envelope in his hand again. $5,000. That was what he thought my life was worth. That was the price he was putting on my silence and my exile. Take it, Bradley urged, thrusting the envelope closer to my chest. Do not be stupid. You have nothing. Your bank accounts are frozen. Your credit is ruined. No one will hire a 72-year-old ex-con. This is Charity Otis. Take the money, go to Florida, and die quietly in the sun. It is the best offer you are going to get. I looked up from the envelope and locked eyes with him. For a second, I let the mask of the frail old man slip. I let him see the Otis King who used to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts with mobsters and mayors alike. I let him see the fire that was still burning deep inside the ashes. Keep your money. Bradley, I said, my voice dropping an octave, steady and hard as granite. He blinked, surprised by the change in my tone. Excuse me, he said. I said keep it, I repeated. Use it to buy sleeping pills. Or maybe some good lawyers, because you are going to need them. Bradley stared at me for a moment, and then he burst out laughing. It was a loud, genuine laugh of disbelief. Are you threatening me? He asked, wiping a tear from his eye. You? Look at you, Otis. You are wearing clothes that smell like disinfectant. You are standing in the snow with a trash bag. I own the city. I am building the Pierce Tower, the tallest residential building in Chicago. I have the mayor on speed dial. You are a ghost. You are nothing. We will see about that, I said. I turned my back on him and started walking toward the road. I could hear him sputtering behind me, confused by my refusal. You are making a mistake, he shouted after me, his voice losing its cool composure. If you stay in Chicago, I will make your life a living hell. I will have the police on you for harassment if you come within 500 feet of my house. You will freeze to death on the streets, Otis. Do you hear me? You will die alone. I kept walking. I did not look back. I raised my hand and hailed a beat-up yellow taxi that was cruising past the prison looking for a fare. The driver, a young man with tired eyes, looked at me suspiciously as I opened the door. I do not have much cash, I told him, showing him the $40 from my release fund. Can you get me to the south side? He looked at the prison gate, then at me, and then he nodded. Get in, Pops. As the taxi pulled away, I looked out the rear window. Bradley was still standing there next to his Porsche, the white envelope still in his hand. He looked small in the rearview mirror. He looked like a man who thought he had won a game of chess without realizing his opponent had not even made his first move yet. He thought he had broken me. He thought prison had made me weak. He did not understand that prison is a forge. If you go in soft, you come out destroyed, but if you go in hard, you come out unbreakable. I sat back against the torn vinyl seat of the taxi and closed my eyes. The heater was rattling and blowing lukewarm air, but it felt like luxury after 5 years of drafty cells. Where to on the south side, the driver asked, watching me in the mirror. Take me to Marcus's Auto Repair on 47th Street, I said. You got family there? The driver asked, making conversation. Something like that, I murmured. I looked out the window as the gray landscape of the prison faded into the outskirts of Chicago. The city was changing. I could see new cranes on the skyline. I could see the skeleton of the Pierce Tower rising in the distance, dominating the view. It was supposed to be my legacy. It was supposed to be the King Tower. Now it bore the name of the man who stole it. My mind drifted back to the day of my arrest. The police coming into my office, the handcuffs, the look of mock horror on Bradley's face, the way he held Jasmine while she cried, telling her daddy had made a mistake. He had played the role of the concerned son-in-law perfectly. He had told the press he was devastated, but he would step up to save the company. He had told the judge he wanted leniency for me because of my advanced age and mental decline. Mental decline. That was his masterstroke. He convinced the world I was a senile old fool who got greedy. I touched the breast pocket of my thin jacket. Inside, sewn into the lining so the guards would never find it, was a single piece of paper. It was folded so small it was barely a lump. It was old and worn, fragile to the touch. Bradley thought he had taken everything. He took the bank accounts. He took the deeds to the house. He took the company stocks. But he forgot the most basic rule of construction. You can own the building, but if you do not own the ground it sits on, you do not own anything. He had been so busy stealing the fruit that he never bothered to check who owned the roots of the tree. The taxi hit a pothole and jolted me back to the present. I winced as pain shot through my bad knee. I was old. My body hurt. I had no money. I had no home. My daughter thought I was a criminal. But as I looked at the city skyline coming closer, I felt a cold, hard smile spreading across my face. Bradley Pierce was right about one thing. I was a ghost, and ghosts are very good at haunting the people who murdered them. "Driver," I said, leaning forward, "step on it. I have a lot of work to do." The driver nodded and accelerated. We sped toward the city, toward the betrayal, toward the lies, and toward the retribution that was 5 years overdue. The king was back in his city, and he was coming for his crown. The yellow taxi rattled over the potholes of Lakeshore Drive, the suspension groaning with every bump. I leaned my head against the cold glass of the window, watching the city of Chicago blur past me. It was a city I had helped build, literally. I knew the steel skeleton inside the skyscrapers. I knew how deep the pylons went into the mud of the riverbank. But as we drove away from the prison and toward the south side, the towering glass buildings faded into the rearview mirror, replaced by the jagged skyline of the past. My mind drifted, pulled back by the gravity of a memory I had replayed every night for 5 years in my cell. I closed my eyes, and suddenly the smell of stale taxi air was replaced by the scent of expensive leather and freshly brewed coffee in my old office. It was 5 years ago, a Tuesday, the day my life ended. I was sitting at my mahogany desk reviewing the quarterly reports. Bradley Pierce, my son-in-law and CFO, walked in. He was wearing a navy blue suit, the kind that cost more than a foreman's yearly salary. He looked concerned, his brow furrowed in a performance that in hindsight was worthy of an Academy Award. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, closing the door softly behind him. "It's about the employee pension fund." I looked up, confused. "What about it, Bradley? We just topped it up last month." He placed a folder on my desk. His hands were shaking slightly, a nice touch. He opened it to reveal a series of withdrawal slips. My signature was scrawled at the bottom of each one, thick, heavy strokes in black ink. It looked like my signature. It felt like my signature. But I had never signed them. "The auditors found these this morning," Bradley said, his voice dropping to a whisper. $3 million, Otis. Gone. Transferred to an offshore shell company. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "That is impossible. I never touched that money. That is for the workers. That is for the men and women who break their backs for us." Bradley walked around the desk and put a hand on my shoulder. "I know you think that, Dad. I know you believe it. But we have noticed things. You have been forgetting meetings. You have been confusing names. Jasmine and I, we are worried. The doctor said early onset dementia can manifest as paranoia and erratic financial behavior." I shoved his hand away. "I am not senile, Bradley, and I am not a thief." Just then the office door burst open. It wasn't my secretary. It was 2 detectives from the Financial Crimes Division. Behind them stood my daughter Jasmine. She was crying, her hands covering her mouth. "Daddy," she sobbed. "Bradley told me. He told me you were confused. Why did you do it?" I looked at her, my heart shattering. "Jasmine, baby, no. He is lying." But Bradley stepped between us, playing the protector. "Officer, please be gentle with him. He is not well. He does not know what he is doing. Look at him. He is confused. He is an old man who lost his way." I tried to lunge at him, to grab him by his silk tie and shake the truth out of him. But the detectives were on me instantly. I felt the cold steel of handcuffs bite into my wrists. I saw the flash of satisfaction in Bradley's eyes, gone in an instant, replaced by that mask of sorrow. He had framed me. He had forged my signature, stolen the money, and then used my age against me. He painted me as a greedy, senile old man robbing his own people. And because he was young, white, and polished, and I was just an old black contractor from the South Side, the world believed him. The taxi hit a massive pothole, jolting me back to the present. I gasped the phantom sensation of handcuffs still on my wrists. I looked at my hands. They were wrinkled, scarred, and empty, but they were free. We were crossing into the south side now. The scenery had changed. The luxury condos were gone, replaced by brick row houses, boarded-up storefronts, and the resilient hustle of my people. This was where I came from. This was where Otis King was made. Bradley thought sending me to Florida with a bus ticket would erase me. He didn't understand that you can't exile a man from his own soul. "Driver, pull in there," I said, pointing a shaking finger at a faded sign on the corner of 47th Street. Marcus's Auto Repair. The building was a converted warehouse, the brick painted a peeling blue. Tires were stacked high by the entrance like rubber totem poles. It looked run down to anyone else, but to me it looked like a fortress. The taxi screeched to a halt. The meter read $45. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old leather wallet they had returned to me at the prison. Inside was my debit card from the private bank I had used for 30 years. I knew there should be money in there, personal savings that had nothing to do with the company. I handed the card to the driver. He swiped it on his mobile terminal. Beep. Declined. He frowned and swiped it again. Beep. Declined. "Try it again," I said, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. "There is money on that card." The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes narrowing. "It says, card canceled, Pops. Reported stolen or lost. Account frozen. Do you have cash?" I felt the blood drain from my face. Bradley. Of course. He had power of attorney. Or he had forged it. He had systematically cut every lifeline I had. He didn't just want me out of town. He wanted me destitute. He wanted me to have no choice but to use that $5,000 he offered to accept his charity to be the beggar he claimed I was. I stammered, checking my pockets. I only had the $40 from the prison. I was $5 short. The driver turned around, his face hardening. "Look, old man, don't try to play me. If you can't pay, I'm calling the cops. I don't work for free." The humiliation burned my throat. I was Otis King. I used to sign checks for millions of dollars without blinking. And now I was about to be arrested for $5. Suddenly, a heavy metal rolling door groaned open from the garage. A man stepped out, wiping grease from his hands with a red rag. He was huge, built like a linebacker with graying hair and a face that had seen too many hard winters. He wore oil-stained coveralls with the name Marcus embroidered on the chest. He looked at the taxi, then at me in the back seat. He stopped wiping his hands. He squinted as if seeing a ghost. Then he walked over to the driver's window. He leaned down, his massive frame blocking out the sun. "How much does he owe you?" Marcus asked, his voice deep and gravelly like a cement mixer. "45. And he's short," the driver snapped. Marcus reached into his greasy coveralls, pulled out a wad of cash, peeled off a 50 and tossed it through the window. "Keep the change. Now get lost." The driver didn't argue. He took the money and unlocked the doors. I stepped out onto the cracked pavement, my legs feeling weak, not from age, but from shame. The taxi sped off, leaving me standing there in the cold wind with my plastic bag. I couldn't look Marcus in the eye. I had hired him 20 years ago when no one else would give him a chance because of a juvenile record. I had helped him buy this shop, and now he was paying my cab fare, Mr. Otis, Marcus said softly. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me with pity. He was looking at me with respect, with loyalty. "I thought you were dead," Marcus said, "or gone. The news said you were in a facility upstate." "I was," I said. "I'm out, Marcus." He nodded slowly. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask if I was guilty. He knew. Marcus always knew who the real crooks were. "Come inside, boss. It's freezing out here." We walked into the garage. It smelled of motor oil, old rubber, and stale coffee. It was the best smell in the world. It smelled honest. Marcus led me to the small office in the back, cluttered with car parts and old calendars. He cleared a stack of invoices off a chair. "Sit," he commanded. "You look like you walked here from hell." "Close enough," I muttered. Marcus went to a metal cabinet in the corner. It was covered in rust and stickers. He moved a heavy stack of brake pads, revealing a false panel in the back. He pried it open with a screwdriver and pulled out a small, heavy metal box. It was an old ammunition case painted olive drab, chipping away to reveal the steel beneath. He placed it on the desk in front of me with a heavy thud. "You told me to keep this safe," Marcus said. 5 years ago, the day before the arrest. You called me and said, "Come get the box. Don't open it. Don't let anyone see it. Just hide it." I ran my hand over the cold metal of the box. I remembered that day. I had felt the walls closing in. I had seen the way Bradley was looking at the books, the way he stopped talking when I entered the room. My gut had told me a storm was coming. I didn't know it would be a hurricane, but I knew I had to bury a seed if I wanted the tree to survive. "Is it all there?" I asked. "I haven't touched it," Marcus said. "I slept with a shotgun under my bed for the first year thinking someone would come for it. That son-in-law of yours, he sent people here once, suits, asking if you left anything. I told them you only left oil stains. They didn't come back." I opened the latch. It clicked loudly in the quiet office. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect against moisture, were documents. Not money, not diamonds, paper. Yellowing, dense legal documents dating back 20 years. And underneath them, a small black ledger book. This box was the only thing Bradley hadn't stolen, because he didn't know it existed. "He thinks he blocked me, Marcus," I said, staring at the papers. "He canceled my cards. He took my house. He turned my daughter against me. He thinks money is the only power in this world." I looked up at Marcus. My eyes were dry. The shame was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating focus. He forgot where he came from. He forgot that before you build the penthouse, you have to dig the hole. Marcus grinned, revealing a gold tooth. "So what's the plan, boss? You want me to round up the boys? We can go down to that fancy glass tower of his and make some noise." "No," I said, closing the box. "Not yet. Noise is for amateurs. We are going to be quiet. We are going to be invisible. Bradley Pierce wants to play big business. He wants to play Monopoly." "Fine." I tapped the metal lid of the box. "I am going to remind him that I own the board. But first I need a phone, a burner. And I need to find Saul. Is he out yet?" Marcus nodded. "Saul Weathers. Yeah, he got out last month. He's working out of a basement on 63rd. Disbarred, broke, and angry. Just how you like them." "Perfect," I said. I stood up, grabbing my cane. The pain in my knee was still there, but I didn't feel it anymore. Adrenaline is a powerful painkiller. Bradley blocked my money. He thinks that stops me. He doesn't realize that in the South Side, currency isn't just numbers in a bank account. Currency is favors. Currency is loyalty. Currency is knowing where the bodies are buried and knowing who holds the shovel. Marcus handed me a prepaid phone from his drawer. "Welcome home, Mr. Otis," he said. I took the phone and dialed the number for Saul Weathers. It rang twice. "Yeah," a gravelly voice answered. "Saul, it's Otis," I said. There was a long pause, then a low chuckle. "Well, well, the construction king returns. I heard you got a one-way ticket to Florida." "I missed the bus," I said. "Get your suit ready, Saul. We have a skyscraper to tear down." I hung up the phone and looked at Marcus. "Let's get to work." My son-in-law thought he had buried me. He was right, but he forgot that I am a seed, and it was time to grow. 63rd Street was not a place for men like Bradley Pierce. It was a place where the streetlights flickered and the pavement was cracked by the roots of stubborn weeds that refused to die. It was a place where hope was a currency harder to come by than gold. But for me, it was the perfect war room. I stood in front of a narrow brick building sandwiched between a liquor store and a payday loan shark. A faded neon sign in the window buzzed with an irritating hum reading simply, "Tax Services and Notary." This was the castle of Saul Weathers. Saul was a legend in the state penitentiary. He had been a high-flying corporate lawyer 30 years ago, the kind who wore three-piece suits and billed $500 an hour. Then he got caught moving money that shouldn't have been moved for clients who shouldn't have existed. He lost his license, his wife, and 10 years of his life to the state. But inside the walls, he was the oracle. He knew every loophole, every technicality, and every gray area in the law. We had shared a cell for 2 years. He taught me that the law isn't about truth. It is about paperwork. I pushed open the door. A bell chimed softly. The office smelled of old paper, cheap instant coffee, and cigarette smoke. Piles of files were stacked from the floor to the ceiling, a labyrinth of legal chaos. Sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been salvaged from a dumpster fire was Saul. He looked exactly as I remembered: disheveled gray hair, a stain on his tie, and eyes that were sharper than a razor blade. He didn't look up from the file he was reading. "You are 5 minutes late, Otis. I thought you construction types were punctual." "Traffic was bad," I said, closing the door behind me and locking it, "and I had to make a stop." Saul finally looked up. He took off his reading glasses and grinned. It was the grin of a wolf who just smelled a wounded deer. "You got the box?" I placed the heavy metal ammunition case on his desk. It landed with a dull thud that shook his coffee mug. "I got the box," I said. Saul rubbed his hands together. "Beautiful. I have been waiting a month for this. Ever since I walked out of that gate, I have been dreaming about what is inside here." He reached for a bottle of cheap whiskey in his drawer and poured 2 shots into paper cups. He slid one across the desk to me. "To freedom," he said. "To justice," I corrected him. We drank. The liquid burned, but it woke me up. Saul leaned back in his creaky chair. "So, tell me the situation. How is the prodigal son-in-law?" "He met me at the gate," I said, sitting down on a folding metal chair. "He offered me $5,000 and a bus ticket. He told me he is building the Pierce Tower. He told me he owns the city." Saul laughed. "The Pierce Tower. I have seen the billboards. Luxury living in the sky. It is the biggest project in Chicago right now. He leveraged everything to build that, didn't he? Everything." I nodded. "He mortgaged the company assets. He took out loans against future earnings. He even tapped into the private equity of investors who think he is the next real estate messiah. He needs that tower to sell out completely just to break even." "And if it doesn't," Saul asked, his eyes gleaming, "if it doesn't, he is not just bankrupt. He is buried. The banks will come for him. The investors will come for him. And the feds will come for him, because I know for a fact he is moving money around to cover the construction delays." Saul tapped his fingers on the metal box. "So what is the play, Otis? Do we sue him for the company theft? We can try to reopen your case. Prove the signatures were forged." I shook my head slowly. "No, that is a loser's game. Bradley owns the judges in that district. He has a team of lawyers who will bury us in motions for 10 years. I will be dead before I see a day in court. You can't beat a man in a casino he owns, Saul. You have to burn the casino down." I pointed at the box. "Open it." Saul undid the latch and carefully unwrapped the oilcloth. He pulled out the stack of yellowing documents. He started reading, his eyes scanning the legal jargon with the speed of a machine. He flipped through the pages, mumbling to himself. Deed of sale, 20 years ago, purchase price, location. Wait. He stopped. He went back a page. He looked up at me, then back at the paper. He pulled a map of the city out from under a pile of trash and spread it on the desk. He traced a line with his finger. "Otis," he whispered. "This deed. This isn't for the building." "No," I said softly. "This is for the land." Saul said, his voice rising in excitement. "The actual plot. 400 North Lake Shore Drive. You bought this personally. Not through the company." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. 20 years ago, that land was a dump. Nobody wanted it. The city was selling it for pennies. I bought it with my own savings. Cash. I didn't want the company to carry the liability if the environmental cleanup was too expensive. So I kept it in my name. "And the company?" Saul asked. "I leased it to the company," I explained. "A ground lease. 99 years. "No," I smiled. "That is what Bradley thinks. He saw the file labeled lease agreement in the company archives and assumed it was standard. He never checked the expiration date. He never checked the fine print because he was too busy looking at the assets he could steal." I reached over and flipped the document to the last page. "Look at the term, Saul." Saul adjusted his glasses and read out loud. "Term of lease. 20 years. Commencing on January 15th, 2004. Ending on..." He stopped. He looked at the calendar on his wall. He looked back at me. His face went pale, and then it turned a bright shade of red as he started to laugh, a deep belly-shaking laugh. "January 15th, 2024, he choked out. "That is tomorrow. Otis, that is tomorrow." "Exactly," I said. "Tomorrow is the grand opening of the Pierce Tower. Tomorrow is the day he cuts the ribbon. And tomorrow is the day his lease on the ground expires." Saul slammed his hand on the desk. "And the reversion clause." "Tell me there is a reversion clause." "Read paragraph 14C, I said. Saul scrambled to find it. "Upon expiration of this lease, if the lessee has not renewed the agreement in writing at least 6 months prior to the termination date, all improvements, structures, and fixtures constructed upon the said land shall revert to the sole ownership of the lessor without compensation." Saul dropped the paper. He looked at me with pure awe. "Improvements and structures," he whispered. "That means the tower. The whole damn tower. He built a $500 million skyscraper on my dirt, Saul," I said, my voice cold. "And tomorrow at noon, that dirt stops being his playground." The lease expires. The land is mine. And everything sitting on that land becomes mine. Saul stood up and started pacing around the small office. This is diabolical. This is beautiful. He doesn't know. He has no idea, I said. He fired the old legal team 5 years ago when he took over. He hired cheap corporate lawyers who only look at digital files. The original deed and the wet ink lease were in that box. The copy in the office was destroyed in a flooding accident in the archives room 3 years ago. I heard about it from Marcus. Bradley thinks the digital record says 99 years because that's what he told his data entry clerks to type in when they migrated the system. He believes his own lie. Saul poured another shot of whiskey. So we don't sue him. We just show up. We evict him, I said. But we have to be careful. Saul warned his lawyer brain kicking back in. If we move too early, he can file for an emergency injunction. He can claim administrative error. He can try to force a renewal. That is why we need leverage, I said. We need to make sure that when the hammer drops, he has no friends left to call. We need to weaken him first. I need to know where his money is really coming from. I need to know who he is sleeping with. I need to know which inspectors he bribed. I looked at the stack of files in the box. There is a black ledger in there too. It contains the names of every favor I did for every contractor, union leader, and city official in this town for 40 years. I picked up the ledger and held it up. Bradley thinks power is money. Power is people, Saul. And a lot of people in this city still owe Otis King a favor. Saul sat back down, a wicked smile playing on his lips. So what is the first move? We rattle the cage, I said. We make him nervous. We make him make mistakes. I want to hit his financing. I want the bank to get cold feet. Can you draft a letter? Something anonymous. Something that suggests there are structural issues with the foundation. Saul cracked his knuckles. I can draft a letter that will make the bank president wet his pants. I know exactly which regulations to cite. I will make it look like it came from a whistleblowing engineer. Do it, I said. Send it tonight. And what are you going to do? Saul asked. I am going to see my daughter, I said, standing up. Saul frowned. Is that wise? You said she signed a restraining order. I need to see her eyes. Saul, I need to know if she is part of this or if she is a victim too. If she is with him, she goes down with him. But if there is any part of my little girl left in there, I have to try to pull her out of the wreckage before the building collapses. Saul nodded. Be careful, Otis. A wounded animal is dangerous, but a rich man who is about to lose everything is lethal. I buttoned my thin jacket. I am not afraid of him, Saul. I survived 5 years in a cage with murderers and rapists. Bradley Pierce is just a boy playing dress-up in a man's suit. I walked to the door and paused, looking back at the dingy office. It wasn't much, but it was ground zero. Get some sleep, Saul. Tomorrow we start taking back my city. Brick by brick. I stepped out into the night. The wind was howling off Lake Michigan, bitter and relentless. It bit into my skin, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the fire burning in my chest. I walked down 63rd Street, my cane tapping a rhythm on the concrete. Tap, tap, tap. It was the sound of a countdown. Bradley Pierce was sleeping in my bed, living in my house and running my company. He was probably dreaming of his grand opening of the champagne of the applause. Let him sleep. Let him dream. Because when he wakes up, he is going to find out that the boogeyman is real. And the boogeyman has the deed to the land under his feet. The Drake Hotel stands like a limestone fortress on the edge of Lake Michigan, a monument to old money in Chicago history. I knew the building well, not because I stayed in the guest suites, but because my company had renovated the grand ballroom 15 years ago. I knew that the service entrance on the north side had a faulty latch that the staff propped open with a brick during shift changes. I knew the corridors that led from the kitchen to the main floor were a maze of steam and shouting chefs where an old man in a waiter's jacket could vanish like smoke. Tonight was the Winter Gala, the kind of event where a ticket cost more than my father made in a lifetime. It was a parade of diamonds, furs, and fake smiles. It was exactly the kind of place Bradley Pierce loved to preen. I had spent the last of the cash Marcus gave me on a second-hand tuxedo from a pawn shop on State Street. It smelled faintly of mothballs, and the sleeves were a half-inch too short, but in the dim light of the service corridor, I looked enough like a servant to pass. I slipped through the kitchen, dodging trays of filet mignon and flutes of champagne, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear of getting caught, but from the terror of what I might find. I stepped out from behind a velvet curtain and into the ballroom. The noise hit me first, a wall of polite chatter and string quartet music that sounded like a funeral march disguised as a celebration. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling, casting a golden glow over the crowd. I scanned the room, my eyes moving with the precision of a surveyor looking for cracks in a foundation. I ignored the politicians I used to donate to. I ignored the developers I used to outbid. I was looking for only one thing. Then I saw her. Jasmine was standing near the ice sculpture, a frozen swan that was slowly melting under the hot lights. My breath caught in my throat. My little girl. The last time I saw her in the courtroom 5 years ago, she had been angry, vibrant, and full of righteous indignation. She had looked like a warrior, even if she was fighting on the wrong side. Now she looked like a ghost. She was wearing a silver gown that clung to her frame, but there was nothing to cling to. She was skeletal. Her collarbones jutted out sharp enough to cut glass. She was wearing a diamond necklace heavy and thick that looked less like jewelry and more like a collar. Her hair was pulled back so tight it pulled at her skin, giving her a permanent look of surprise or terror. But it was her eyes that broke my heart. They were dull. The fire was gone. They were the eyes of a person who had learned that speaking only brings pain. She was holding a glass of sparkling water with both hands, and I could see the tremors from 30 feet away. She was shaking. I started to move toward her, weaving through the crowd. I had to be careful. I had to be gentle. If I startled her, she might shatter. Bradley was nowhere to be seen. He was probably working the room, charming investors, selling them condos in a tower that stood on land he did not own. This was my chance. I reached her side and whispered her name, Jazzy. She didn't turn around. She froze. Her shoulders hunched up as if she expected a blow. The glass in her hands rattled against her ring. Jazzy, it is me. It is Daddy. She turned slowly. When she saw me, her face didn't light up with recognition. It filled with panic. She took a step back, bumping into a waiter with a tray of empty glasses. The crash of breaking glass silenced the nearby conversations, but Jasmine didn't seem to notice. She was staring at me like I was a monster from a nightmare. No, she whispered. You are not here. You are in prison. You are not here. I am out, baby. I got out yesterday. I came to see you. I reached out a hand to touch her arm, just a gentle touch to let her know I was real. But the moment my fingers grazed her skin, she flinched so violently she almost fell over. Don't touch me, she gasped, her voice rising in hysteria. He said you would come. He said you would try to trick me. Who said that, Jazzy? Bradley. He said you are sick. She recited the words, sounding rehearsed like a script she had been forced to memorize. He said you have dementia. He said you get violent when you are confused. Please go away. I do not want to be hurt again. The word hung in the air between us. Again. I felt a cold rage spread through my veins, colder than the winter wind outside. Hurt again. I had never laid a hand on my daughter in my life. I had never raised my voice to her. Who had been hurting her? Jasmine, look at me. Look at my eyes. Do I look confused? Do I look sick? I am your father. I built your first treehouse. I taught you how to read blueprints. That man is lying to you. She looked at me, and for a second, just a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of the old Jasmine. I saw a desperate plea for help behind the wall of fear. She opened her mouth to speak, her lip trembling. Daddy, she whispered. But before she could say another word, a heavy hand landed on her shoulder. It wasn't a comforting touch. It was a claim of ownership. There you are, darling. Bradley's voice boomed smooth and loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. I was wondering where you wandered off to. He stepped between us, shielding her from me, but also blocking her view of me. He looked at me with a mix of mock pity and sharp triumph. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit perfectly, and he looked every inch the grieving son-in-law dealing with a difficult relative. Otis, he said, shaking his head. I told you not to come here. Look what you are doing to her. She is shaking. He turned to the crowd, raising his voice just enough to be heard by the curious onlookers. I apologize, everyone. My father-in-law is not well. He has episodes. He forgets where he is. He is lying, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Ask her, Bradley. Ask her if she wants to talk to her father without you standing on her neck. Bradley tightened his grip on Jasmine's shoulder. I saw her wince. He smiled at me, a cold, dead smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Jasmine, darling, tell him. Tell him to leave. Tell him you are afraid." Jasmine looked down at the floor. She looked at Bradley's shiny, patent leather shoes. She took a shallow breath. "Please leave," she whispered to the floor. "You are upsetting my husband." It was like a knife in my gut. Upsetting her husband. Not upsetting her. She was programmed. She was trying to protect herself by protecting his ego. "Security," Bradley called out, snapping his fingers. Two large men in dark suits materialized from the crowd. They weren't hotel security. They were private muscle. I recognized the type. Ex-cops or failed military who enjoyed hurting people for a paycheck. "Escort Mr. King out," Bradley commanded, "and make sure he doesn't hurt himself, or anyone else." The guards grabbed my arms. I didn't fight them. I was 72 years old and I had a bad knee. If I fought, I would end up on the floor and Bradley would win the optical war. I needed to walk out with dignity. I shook them off for a second and fixed Bradley with a stare that would have peeled paint off a wall. "You think you have won," I said quietly so only he and Jasmine could hear. "You think because you broke her spirit, you have won the war. But you forgot one thing, Bradley. You can break glass, but you cannot break steel. And she is my daughter. She is made of steel even if she doesn't remember it yet." "Get him out of here," Bradley hissed, his mask slipping for a millisecond. The guards dragged me toward the exit. The crowd parted, murmuring about the poor, crazy old man and the saint of a son-in-law who took care of him. I looked back over my shoulder. Bradley was whispering something in Jasmine's ear. She was nodding rapidly, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. He took a handkerchief and wiped her face, not with tenderness, but with the annoyance of someone cleaning a stain off a car seat. They threw me out the side door into the alley behind the hotel. I stumbled and fell onto the wet pavement, scraping my palms. The heavy metal door slammed shut, sealing the warmth and the lies inside. I sat there on the cold asphalt for a long time. My knee was throbbing. My cheap tuxedo was ruined. I was humiliated. I was alone. But as I sat there amidst the garbage dumpsters and the smell of rotting food, a change happened inside me. Before tonight, this was about business. It was about the land. It was about the building. It was about proving I was innocent and getting my company back. It was a game of chess. But now it was war. I had seen the bruises on her soul. I had seen the way she flinched. Bradley Pierce hadn't just stolen my money, he had stolen my daughter's light. He had taken a vibrant, intelligent woman and turned her into a terrified animal to feed his own ego. He was gaslighting her. He was isolating her. He was making her doubt her own reality so she would be dependent on him. It was the oldest trick in the abuser's handbook. I pulled myself up using a dumpster for support. I brushed the dirt off my knees. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone Marcus had given me. I dialed Saul's number. It was late, but I knew he would be awake. "Otis," Saul answered. "How did it go? Did you see her?" "I saw her," I said. My voice was steady, but it was vibrating with a new kind of intensity. And Saul asked, "Change of plans, Saul. What do you mean, change of plans? Are we not going after the building? We are going after everything," I said, looking up at the towering silhouette of the hotel. "But the priority has shifted. I don't just want to bankrupt him, Saul. I want to destroy him. I want to strip him naked and leave him with nothing but his shame." "Why, Otis? What happened?" "He hurt her, Saul. He broke my little girl." There was a silence on the line. Then Saul spoke, his voice dropping low. "Then let's burn it all down, Otis. Let's burn it all down." I hung up the phone. I looked at the service entrance one last time. "Hold on, Jazzy," I whispered into the night. "Daddy is coming, and I am bringing a sledgehammer." I turned and walked into the darkness of the alley. I wasn't just a businessman anymore. I wasn't just a contractor. I was a father. And God have mercy on the man who stands between a father and his daughter, because I certainly wouldn't. The morning after the gala, I did not wake up hungover. I woke up with a clarity that was sharper than a diamond cutter. The image of my daughter trembling in that ballroom was burned into my retinas. It fueled me. It replaced the blood in my veins with something colder and more efficient. I was done grieving. It was time to go hunting. I arrived at Saul's office before he did. I sat on the stoop watching the sun rise over the cracked pavement of 63rd Street drinking coffee from a styrofoam cup. When Saul finally shuffled up the sidewalk looking like he had slept in his suit, he didn't say hello. He just unlocked the door and waved me inside. "We have a problem," Saul said, tossing his briefcase onto the desk. Or rather, an opportunity, depending on how you look at it. He pulled out a sheaf of papers. They were printouts from a hacking forum he frequented. Saul might have been disbarred, but he still knew people who could find things that were not meant to be found. "Bradley is broke," Saul said. I frowned. "I saw him last night, Saul. He was wearing a $5,000 tuxedo. He is building a skyscraper. He is cash poor," Saul corrected. "He is leverage rich. There is a difference. That tower is consuming cash like a furnace. He is over budget by $40 million. The suppliers are demanding payment up front because his credit rating is taking a hit. He needs a bridge loan. A big one. $50 million to finish the interiors and get the occupancy permit." I leaned forward. "Who is lending him that kind of money?" "The major banks blacklisted him last year. First City Bank," Saul said. "They are hungry for a landmark project. They are about to sign off on the loan. The closing is scheduled for this Friday." I looked at the documents. It was a standard loan application, but then my eyes caught something on page 4. Under the section titled Key Personnel and Corporate History, Bradley had listed me. Otis King, founder, senior advisor. My hand curled into a fist. He put my name on the application. He framed me. He sent me to prison. He told the world I was senile. And now he was using my name and my 50-year reputation for honesty to secure a loan. "He is using your ghost to co-sign his debt," Saul said, lighting a cigarette. "The bank feels safer knowing the legendary Otis King is still attached to the company, even if it is just in an advisory role. They don't know you are estranged. They don't know he stole it. They just see the name King and they see dollar signs." "This is fraud," I said, my voice low. "It is fraud." Saul agreed, "But if we report it as fraud, it triggers an investigation. That takes months. Bradley gets the money this Friday. By the time the fraud is proven, he will have spent it. We need to stop the money now. Today." I stood up and walked to the window. I watched a city bus struggle through the slush. I thought about how buildings are made. You start with the foundation. If the foundation is rotten, it doesn't matter how pretty the penthouse is. "Bradley has a secret," I said, turning back to Saul. Saul raised an eyebrow. "Which one?" "The man has more skeletons than a graveyard. 3 years ago, before the trial, I was reviewing the concrete pours for the Westside Community Center project. Bradley was in charge of procurement. He switched suppliers at the last minute. He bought substandard concrete from a shell company he owned to pocket the difference." "I remember that," Saul said. "But we never found proof." "I didn't have the proof then," I said. "But I kept the core samples." Saul froze. "You kept the samples." I nodded. "I have a cylinder of cured concrete from that pour sitting in Marcus's garage. It looks fine on the outside, but if you stress test it, it crumbles at 60% of the required load. If that community center ever has a packed house and the beat drops too hard, the floor could give way." Saul grinned a slow, predatory grin. "And if the bank knew that the CEO of King Construction has a history of using fraudulent materials on public projects, they would view the Pierce Tower as a toxic asset," I finished. "Banks hate risk, Saul. They are cowards. They run at the first sign of trouble." Saul pulled a typewriter out from under his desk, an actual mechanical typewriter. "Why not use a computer?" I asked. "Digital footprint," Saul said, tapping his temple. "Printers leave invisible codes. Typewriters are anonymous. We are going to write a letter, a concerned whistleblowing engineer who just can't sleep at night anymore." We spent the next hour drafting the letter. We didn't sound angry, we sounded technical. We cited the batch numbers. We cited the specific dates of the pour. We cited the exact stress test ratios that were falsified. It was a masterpiece of corporate sabotage. To the chief risk officer at First City Bank, it has come to my attention, latent structural defects, potential class action liability. When we were done, Saul put the letter in a plain brown envelope. He didn't lick it. He used a damp sponge to seal it to avoid leaving DNA. "I will have a courier run this over," Saul said. "It will be on the VP's desk by lunch." And then I asked. "And then we wait," Saul said. I couldn't just wait. I needed to see. I needed to know if the arrow had hit its mark. I took the bus downtown. I wore my mechanic's coveralls and a beanie pulled low over my face. I looked like just another janitor or maintenance worker. I walked into the lobby of the First City Bank building. It was a cathedral of marble and glass. I sat on a bench near the elevators pretending to read a newspaper. At 2 o'clock, Bradley walked in. He looked like $1 million. He was flanked by 2 junior associates carrying thick leather binders. He was smiling, shaking hands with the security guard, acting like he already owned the vault. He got into the elevator, going up to the executive suites on the 40th floor. I waited. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Usually these closings are ceremonial. The deal is already done. They just sign the papers and drink the champagne. It should have been over in 20 minutes. An hour passed. Then the elevator doors opened. Bradley didn't walk out. He stormed out. His face was a shade of red I had never seen before. It was the color of raw meat. He was shouting at one of his associates, oblivious to the people in the lobby. "What do you mean, pending internal review?" he screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "We had a deal. They can't just pause a $50 million wire because of some anonymous piece of paper." "Sir, please lower your voice," the associate pleaded, looking terrified. "Don't tell me what to do," Bradley roared. "Get the legal team on the phone. This is sabotage. It is the competition. It is those bastards at Turner Construction. They are trying to bleed me out." I lowered my newspaper just an inch, watching him over the top of the sports section. He was unraveling. He was pacing in circles, running his hands through his perfect hair, messing it up. He looked at his watch, then at his phone, then back at the elevator. "They want a core sample," he spat out. "They want to drill into the West Side Center. Do you know how long that takes? Do you know what happens to my interest rates if we miss the payment to the steel guys tomorrow?" He kicked a trash can, sending it skidding across the polished floor. Security started to move toward him. I sat there perfectly still. I felt a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. It wasn't happiness. It was darker than that. It was the feeling of a judge reading a verdict. Bradley looked around the lobby, his eyes wild. For a second, his gaze swept over me. I held my breath. But he didn't see Otis King, the founder of his company. He didn't see his father-in-law. He just saw an old black man in dirty coveralls reading a newspaper. To him, I was furniture. I was invisible. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Jasmine," he barked into the phone. "No, I am not coming home for dinner. The deal didn't close. No, don't ask me why. Just, do we have any liquid cash in the joint account? Well, transfer it, all of it. I don't care if it's for the Gala Charity Fund. I need liquidity now." He stormed out through the revolving doors into the cold Chicago afternoon, leaving his terrified associates trailing behind him like beaten dogs. I waited 5 minutes, then I stood up. I folded the newspaper and placed it neatly on the bench. I walked out of the bank, not through the revolving door but through the side exit. I walked to the nearest payphone and called Saul. "He just left," I said. And Saul asked. "He is bleeding," I said. "He thinks it is the competition. He thinks it is Turner Construction." "Good," Saul chuckled. "Let him chase shadows. While he is looking at his competitors, he won't be looking at his feet." "What is the next step?" I asked. "He is desperate," Saul said. "He just lost his bridge loan. He is going to need fast cash to keep the lights on at the site. When a man like Bradley gets desperate, he gets sloppy. He will start cutting corners on safety. He will start squeezing his workers." "I know," I said. "And when he does, the workers will push back." I hung up the phone. I walked toward the bus stop, but then I stopped. I looked up at the skyline where the cranes of the Pierce Tower were visible in the distance. It was a beautiful building. I had to admit that. The design was sleek, modern, ambitious. It was a tragedy that it was built on a foundation of lies. Bradley was right about one thing. He was being sabotaged. But he was wrong about the source. It wasn't a rival corporation. It wasn't the market. It was the janitor he ignored in the lobby. It was the father he discarded. It was the past he tried to bury. I got on the bus heading back to the south side. I touched the burner phone in my pocket. I had one more call to make tonight. I needed to call Big Mike at the concrete union. If Bradley was going to start squeezing the workers, I wanted to make sure the workers knew exactly who to squeeze back. The trap was set. The credit line was cut. Now we would watch him suffocate. And the best part was, he still thought he was fighting a war against the world, when he was actually fighting a war against a ghost. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton is a place where history whispers from the gold leaf ceilings and the velvet curtains. I have been to this room 100 times. I have accepted awards on this stage. I have shaken hands with mayors and governors under these crystal chandeliers. Tonight I was back, but I was not wearing a tuxedo and I was not sitting at the head table. I was wearing a gray polyester jumpsuit that smelled of industrial bleach, and I was pushing a cart filled with dirty dishes. I was part of the invisible army that makes the city run. The cleaners, the servers, the people who wipe up the spills so the rich folks don't stain their Italian shoes. It was a disguise that was better than any mask. When you wear a jumpsuit and keep your head down, you cease to be a person. You become a function. You become furniture. On the stage, standing behind a podium made of polished oak, was Bradley Pierce. He looked immaculate. The spotlight hit his blonde hair, creating a halo that made him look like a saint. He was giving the keynote speech for the Chicago Business Ethics Alliance. The irony was so thick I could taste it like bile in the back of my throat. Integrity. Bradley said, his voice booming through the speakers smooth as silk. Integrity is not just a word. It is the foundation of everything we build at King Construction. When I took over from my father-in-law, I made a promise to build a future that is transparent, a future that is honest, a future that Chicago can be proud of. Applause rippled through the room, polite applause from men and women who would sell their own mothers for a percentage point. I pushed my cart slowly, weaving through the tables. I kept my eyes on the floor, but my ears were tuned to a specific frequency. I was looking for table 4, the VIP table, the table where the money sat. Sitting there were 3 men I had known for 30 years, Robert Sterling, Michael Chang, and David Ross. These were the men funding the Pierce Tower. They were the private equity sharks who had poured millions into Bradley's dream because they thought it was a sure thing. They were also men who didn't read the fine print because they trusted the name on the door. I stopped my cart right behind Robert Sterling. He was cutting into a piece of prime rib, oblivious to the world. He was a man who valued loyalty but valued profit more. 5 years ago when I was arrested, he didn't call. He didn't ask if I was innocent. He just moved his money to the next horse in the race. I reached out and picked up an empty wine glass from the table. I leaned in close, my face inches from his ear. To anyone watching, it looked like a waiter whispering an apology for reaching across the table. "Hello, Robert," I whispered, my voice low and gravelly. He stiffened but didn't turn around. He probably thought I was asking for a tip. "It is Otis," I said. "Don't turn around. Just listen." He froze. His fork hovered halfway to his mouth. "You are sitting on a time bomb." "Robert," I continued, pouring water into his glass with a steady hand. "Ask your lawyers about Clause 19B in the ground lease for the Pierce Tower. Ask them what happens when the lease expires tomorrow at noon." I saw the color drain from his neck. It went from flushed pink to a sickly shade of gray. 19B, I repeated. "The land reverts to the owner, and Bradley doesn't own the land, Robert. I do." I moved to the next chair. Michael Chang looked up at me, annoyed that a busboy was hovering so close. "Clause 19B. Michael," I whispered. "You are funding a building that is about to be repossessed. Get your money out while you can." I didn't wait for a reaction. I pushed my cart away, moving toward the kitchen doors. I didn't need to see their faces to know what was happening. I could feel the panic starting to radiate from table 4 like heat from a fire. I glanced back. Robert Sterling had dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the fine china. He was fumbling for his phone, his hands shaking. Michael Chang was already typing furiously on his BlackBerry, his face pale. David Ross was whispering urgently to his assistant, who looked like she was about to faint. The ripple effect was immediate. In a room full of sharks, the scent of blood travels fast. People at the neighboring tables saw the panic at the VIP table. They saw the frantic phone calls. They saw the whispered conversations that were suddenly much more interesting than the speech on stage. Bradley noticed it too. From his vantage point on the stage, he could see everything. He saw his biggest investors ignoring him. He saw the disturbance in the force. He faltered in his speech, stumbling over a word. "We believe in transparency," he stammered. His eyes scanned the room, looking for the source of the distraction. And then they landed on me. I was standing near the exit, my hand on the swinging door. I looked back at him. I wasn't hiding anymore. I lifted my chin. I locked eyes with him across the room of 500 people. He stopped speaking mid-sentence. The silence in the room was deafening. The microphone let out a high-pitched squeal of feedback, but no one moved. Bradley stepped down from the podium. He didn't walk down the stairs. He jumped. He marched through the crowd, his face twisting from the benevolent CEO into the arrogant bully I knew so well. He pushed past a waiter, nearly knocking a tray of drinks over. He was coming for me. The crowd parted, watching the spectacle. They didn't know who I was. They just saw a janitor staring down the keynote speaker. Bradley stopped 5 feet away from me. He was breathing hard, his face flushed with rage. He looked at my gray jumpsuit. He looked at my worn-out shoes. He looked at the cart of dirty dishes. And then he smiled. It was a cruel, ugly smile. "Well, well," he said loud enough for the back row to hear. "Look who we have here." I didn't know the prison work release program was catering this event. A few people chuckled nervously. Most just stared. "What are you doing here, Otis?" Bradley sneered, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "Did you run out of that charity money already? Are you here to beg from my friends?" I stood my ground. I didn't flinch. I gripped the handle of my cart, my knuckles white but my face calm. "I am just working, Bradley," I said, my voice steady. "Just cleaning up the trash." He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Cleaning up, that is rich. You were always better with a broom than a balance sheet, Otis. That is why you are where you are. And that is why I am where I am." He looked around the room, playing to the audience. He wanted to humiliate me. He wanted to show everyone that I was beneath him. He wanted to crush me so completely that I would never dare to show my face again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a money clip. It was gold encrusted with diamonds. He peeled off a crisp $100 bill. "You know what he said, holding the bill up like a trophy? I feel generous tonight. Here, take this. Go buy yourself a bus ticket out of town. Or maybe a bottle of cheap gin to drown your sorrows." He didn't hand it to me. He crumbled it into a ball and threw it. It hit my chest and fell to the floor, landing on the plush carpet right between my work boots. "Pick it up," Bradley commanded. "Pick it up. That is more money than you make in a week." The room was silent, absolutely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Hundreds of eyes were on me, waiting to see if the old man would break, waiting to see if I would bend my knee for a scrap of paper. I looked down at the money. Ben Franklin stared back at me from the floor, crumpled and disrespected. Then I looked up at Bradley. I smiled. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It was a smile of pity. "No, thank you," I said. Bradley's eyes widened. "What did you say?" I said, "No, thank you." I repeated, my voice projecting clear and strong. "I don't need your money, Bradley, but you should keep it. You are going to need every cent when the lawyers call you in the morning." I stepped over the money. I didn't kick it. I didn't spit on it. I just stepped over it as if it was a piece of gum on the sidewalk. I pushed my cart forward, forcing Bradley to step aside or be run over. He stumbled back, his composure cracking. "Get out of here," he screamed, losing control. "Security, get this trash out of here." I kept walking. I walked past the stunned guests. I walked past Robert Sterling, who was now shouting into his phone, his face a mask of terror. I walked past Michael Chang, who was packing up his briefcase, looking like he was about to flee a sinking ship. As the kitchen doors swung shut behind me, cutting off the noise of the ballroom, I heard the chaos erupt. I heard the murmurs turning into shouts. I heard the sound of investors panicking. I walked into the steam and noise of the kitchen and stripped off the gray jumpsuit. Underneath, I was wearing my own clothes. Old clothes, but clean clothes. I walked out into the cold Chicago night. The wind hit my face, but it felt warm. I didn't pick up the $100. I left it there on the floor. Let him have it. Let that be the last money he ever sees. Because tomorrow when the clock strikes 12, Bradley Pierce wouldn't just be poor, he would be trespassing. I took a deep breath of the city air. It smelled of exhaust and snow and victory. Clause 19B. It was just a few lines of text on a piece of paper. But tonight those few lines were heavier than a wrecking ball, and I had just swung it right at the glass jaw of the Pierce Tower. Silence is the most expensive sound in the construction business. When you are building a skyscraper, every minute of silence costs thousands of dollars. Labor costs, equipment rental, interest on the loans. A quiet job site is a tombstone, and the Pierce Tower was officially dead quiet. I sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's beat-up tow truck parked across the street from the construction site. I rolled down the window and took a deep breath of the freezing air. It tasted sweet. Through the chain-link fence, I could see the chaos unfolding. It wasn't the chaos of work. It was the chaos of a shutdown. 3 city inspectors wearing bright yellow vests and hard hats were walking around the site like they owned it. They had clipboards in their hands and grim expressions on their faces. Everywhere they pointed, work stopped. They slapped bright orange stickers on the hoists. They wrapped caution tape around the scaffolding. They were shutting it down. And right in the middle of it all was Bradley. He was screaming. From this distance, I couldn't hear the exact words, but I knew the body language. I saw him throw his hands in the air. I saw him point at his watch. I saw him try to intimidate the lead inspector, a man named Kowalski, who I had known for 20 years. Kowalski didn't budge. He just tapped his clipboard and pointed at a fraying safety net on the 30th floor. Bradley didn't know that I had sent Kowalski the photos of that net 2 days ago. He didn't know that I had tipped off the Occupational Safety and Health Administration about the lack of harness protocols on the night shift. He thought this was bad luck. He didn't know it was a hit job. "Look at him," Marcus chuckled from the driver's seat, taking a bite of a sandwich. "He looks like a squirrel trying to fight a bulldozer." "He is bleeding money, Marcus," I said, watching Bradley kick a pile of dirt. Every hour that site is closed, he falls further behind schedule, and the bank penalties kick in at midnight. Bradley pulled out his phone. He made a call, then another. He was pacing back and forth, his long coat flapping in the wind. He was desperate. He had lost his bridge loan from the bank thanks to our first letter. Now his cash flow was being strangled by the city. "Where's he going?" Marcus asked as Bradley suddenly stormed toward his car. "Follow him," I said. We trailed the black Porsche through the city streets. He didn't go to the bank. He didn't go to his lawyers. He didn't go home to my daughter. He drove to a high-end condo building in the Gold Coast. It was a building I knew well because my company had poured the foundation 10 years ago. It was expensive, discreet, the kind of place where people paid extra for privacy. He parked in the garage. We parked on the street. "Who lives here?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," I said, pulling out a camera with a telephoto lens that Saul had procured for us. "But we are about to find out." We waited. 20 minutes later, Bradley emerged. But he wasn't alone. Walking out with him was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was blonde, stunning, and wearing a fur coat that probably cost more than Marcus's truck. I zoomed in with the camera. The shutter clicked rapidly, capturing frame after frame. I recognized her. It was Tiffany, his executive assistant, the one who supposedly managed his calendar. It looked like she was managing a lot more than that. Bradley stopped on the sidewalk. He looked stressed. Tiffany put a hand on his chest. It was an intimate gesture, too intimate for a boss and an employee. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was a kiss that said, "I own you." "Got him," Marcus whispered. I kept shooting. I felt a wave of nausea. My daughter was at home, probably crying, probably wondering why her husband was so distant, and here he was buying comfort with money he didn't have. But the kiss wasn't the smoking gun. A kiss is just infidelity. In the world of business, I needed something more concrete. I needed theft. Bradley pulled out his phone again. He showed Tiffany something on the screen. She smiled and hugged him, squealing with delight. "What did he just do?" Marcus asked. "He just bought her silence," I said. "Or her affection. Either way, he used money." I called Saul immediately. "Saul, he just made a transfer," I said, watching Bradley and Tiffany get into the Porsche. "Monitor the company accounts. Look for anything outgoing in the last 5 minutes. Give me a second." Saul's voice crackled over the line. I hear the typing of keys in the background. "Got it," Saul said. $50,000, wired to a consulting firm called Diamond Sky LLC. "Who owns Diamond Sky?" I asked. Checking, Saul muttered. "Here we go. Sole proprietor Tiffany Miller. Registered address is the condo building you are probably looking at right now." I lowered the camera. He was looting the company. He was taking funds meant for steel and concrete and funneling them to his mistress while his wife sat at home in a house he had mortgaged to the hilt. "He is stealing from the company, Saul," I said, my voice cold. "That is embezzlement." "It is," Saul agreed. "But it is also leverage. If Jasmine sees this, she will see it, I promised. But not yet. Tonight he is going home, and I want to see what he does when he walks through that door." We followed him back to the suburbs, to the house I had bought for Jasmine on her wedding day, the house Bradley now claimed was his. He pulled into the driveway. The lights were on inside. I told Marcus to park down the street. We crept through the neighbor's yard, moving through the shadows like thieves. I knew the layout of this property better than anyone. I had planted the oak trees in the backyard myself. We stood in the darkness of the garden looking through the large French windows of the living room. The curtains were drawn, but they were sheer. We could see the silhouettes perfectly. Jasmine was sitting on the sofa. She looked small. Bradley stormed in. He didn't hug her. He didn't kiss her hello. He threw a stack of papers onto the coffee table. We could hear their voices muffled through the glass. "Sign it," Bradley shouted, pointing at the papers. "I can't." Jasmine's voice was weak, trembling. "That is Grandma's trust fund. It is for the future. You said we would never touch it." "We don't have a choice," Bradley roared. He grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. "The city shut down the site. The bank is stalling. I need liquidity, Jasmine. Do you want us to lose everything? Do you want to be poor like your father?" Jasmine was sobbing now. "But it's all I have left, Bradley." "You have me," he yelled. "Isn't that enough? Or do you want to go back to him? Do you want to go back to the criminal? Because if this project fails, that is where we end up. On the street with him." He was manipulating her fear. He was using me as the boogeyman to scare her into submission. "Just sign the damn papers," he hissed, shoving a pen into her hand. I watched helpless as my daughter took the pen. Her hand was shaking so bad she could barely hold it. She signed away her inheritance. She signed away her safety net. She poured her grandmother's legacy into the black hole of Bradley's ambition. Bradley snatched the papers up. He checked the signature. Then he turned and walked out of the room, leaving her crying on the sofa alone. He didn't comfort her. He didn't say thank you. He got what he wanted and discarded her. I stood there in the snow, my hand gripping the cold bark of the oak tree. I wanted to smash the window. I wanted to rush in there and hold her, but I couldn't. Not yet. If I went in there now, Bradley would call the police. He would spin it. He would say I was stalking them. He would use it to tighten his grip on her. I had to let her hit rock bottom. I had to let her see the truth for herself. I turned to Marcus. My face was wet, but not from tears. It was melting snow mixed with sweat. "Did you get the pictures of the mistress?" I asked. "I got them," Marcus said, holding up the camera. "High definition." "And Saul has the bank transfer records," I said. I looked back at the window one last time. Jasmine had curled up into a ball on the sofa, hugging a pillow. "He took her money to pay for his mistakes," I whispered. "And he took the company money to pay for his pleasure." We walked back to the truck in silence. The pieces were all there. We had the embezzlement, we had the infidelity, we had the structural fraud, and tomorrow we would have the land. Bradley Pierce thought he had just solved his cash flow problem. He thought he had bought himself another week of life. He didn't know that he had just signed his own death warrant. By forcing Jasmine to sign those papers, he had crossed the final line. He hadn't just stolen from me anymore. He had stolen from the women of my family. I climbed into the truck and slammed the door. "Drive, Marcus," I said. "I need to get this suit pressed. Tomorrow is a big day. Tomorrow I wouldn't be hiding in the bushes. Tomorrow I wouldn't be wearing a disguise. Tomorrow I was walking through the front door. And I was bringing the storm with me. The rain in Chicago does not just fall, it hammers you. It comes down in sheets of gray steel, turning the streets into rivers of slush and oil. It was the kind of weather that drives honest people indoors to warm fires and hot soup. But I was not an honest person anymore. I was a hunter, and hunters do not care about the weather. I stood on the corner of Oak Street, sheltering under the awning of a closed bakery. Across the street was the Ethereal Day Spa. It was a place of white marble and lavender scents, a place where wealthy women went to forget that the world was ugly. Marcus had tracked Jasmine's car here. She came every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. It was her routine, her escape. At 2:15, the glass doors opened. Jasmine stepped out. She was huddled under a large black umbrella held by a spa attendant, but even from across the street I could see she was broken. Her shoulders were slumped. Her walk was heavy. She looked like a woman carrying a mountain on her back. She moved toward her white Range Rover parked at the curb. The attendant opened the door for her. I stepped out into the rain. I didn't run. I walked with the steady pace of a man who has nowhere else to go. The cold water soaked through my coat, instantly chilling me to the bone, but the fire in my chest kept me moving. I reached the car just as the attendant closed the door. Jasmine was in the driver's seat, fumbling with her keys. She looked up and saw me standing in the downpour outside her window. Her eyes went wide. She hit the lock button so hard I heard the click through the glass. She started the engine, the powerful motor roaring to life. She was going to leave. She was going to drive away and leave her father standing in the rain because her husband had told her I was dangerous. I stepped in front of the car. It was a reckless move. She could have hit the gas. In her panic, she might have run me over. But I knew my daughter. I knew the little girl who used to cry when she stepped on a bug. She wouldn't hurt me, not physically. She honked the horn, a long, piercing blast that echoed off the wet buildings. "Move!" she screamed, her voice muffled by the glass and the rain. "Move or I will call the police." I didn't move. I stood there, water dripping from the brim of my hat onto my face. I placed my hand on the hood of the car. I could feel the heat of the engine through the metal. "Jasmine," I shouted over the noise of the rain. "Open the window!" "Go away," she yelled back. "You are ruining everything. Why can't you just leave us alone?" I walked to the driver's side window. She flinched, leaning away from the glass as if I was going to break it. Her face was twisted in a mixture of fear and rage. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, mixing with the mascara she hadn't bothered to wash off. "Jasmine, look at me," I said, leaning close to the glass. "I am not leaving. You can call the police. You can run me over. But I am not leaving until you see this." I pulled a thick manila envelope from inside my jacket. It was wrapped in plastic to keep it dry. I held it up against the window. She stared at it. She shook her head. "No, no more lies. Bradley told me about your letters. He told me you are trying to sabotage the loan. He told me you are jealous." "I am not jealous, Jasmine," I said, my voice cracking. "I am terrified. I am terrified that I am going to watch my only child drown because she is tied to an anchor." She revved the engine again. "I am leaving, Dad. Move." I didn't move. I pressed the envelope harder against the glass. "It is about the trust fund, Jasmine. Grandma's money." That stopped her. Her hand hovered over the gear shift. She looked at me, her eyes searching for the madness she had been told was there. But she didn't find madness. She found desperate clarity. She lowered the window 2 inches. Just a crack, enough for the rain to spit inside. "What about the trust fund?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I signed the papers yesterday. It is for the bridge loan, to save the company. To save your legacy." I pushed the envelope through the crack. "Take it," I said. She hesitated. Then she snatched it from my hand as if it were contaminated. "Read the second page," I said. "The bank transfer confirmation." She ripped open the plastic. Her hands were shaking violently. She pulled out the papers. The rain was getting them wet, but the ink was waterproof. She looked at the document I had flagged. It was a wire transfer confirmation from the joint account she shared with Bradley, the account where her trust fund had been deposited less than 24 hours ago. Amount $200,000. Recipient Diamond Sky LLC. "What is this?" she asked, looking up at me confused. "What is Diamond Sky? Is it a contractor? Is it for the steel?" "Turn the page," I said softly. She turned the page. It was a corporate registration document for Diamond Sky LLC. Owner Tiffany Miller. Address 550 North Lakeshore Drive. Apt 12B. "Tiffany," she whispered. His assistant. "Read the memo line on the transfer, Jasmine." She looked back at the first page. In the memo field, Bradley had written something. He was arrogant. He thought no one would ever see this. He thought he was untouchable. "Consulting fees, Paris trip booking." Paris. Jasmine breathed. She looked at me. "He said he was going to Paris next month to meet investors. He said he was going alone to save money. He is taking her, Jasmine," I said. "He is taking your grandmother's money, the money you save for your future children, and he is using it to take his mistress to Paris." "No," she cried, throwing the papers onto the passenger seat. "No, this is fake. You forged this. You are good at forgery, Dad. That is why you went to prison." "Bradley told me. He said you are a master manipulator." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the second item. It wasn't a document. It was a stack of photographs, the ones Marcus and I had taken outside the condo. "I didn't want to show you these," I said, feeling my heart break. "I wanted to protect you from this part. But you need to see the truth." I slid the photos through the window. She didn't want to look. She turned her head away. But curiosity is a powerful force. Slowly, she looked down. The first photo was Bradley and Tiffany walking out of the building. The second photo was Bradley kissing her. The third photo was Tiffany laughing, wearing a long white fur coat. Jasmine gasped, a sound of pure physical pain. She reached out and touched the photo of the coat. That coat, she whispered. What about it? I asked. I saw the charge, she said, tears spilling from her eyes. On the credit card last week, $5,000. I asked him about it. He said it was a gift for a client's wife. He said we had to spend money to make money. She looked at the woman in the picture, the woman wearing the coat bought with family money, the woman kissing her husband. She looked up at me. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. In their place was a gaping hole of devastation. "Daddy," she whimpered. The word sounded like it came from a 5-year-old. I reached through the window and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. "He lied to us both, baby," I said. "He framed me to get the company, and he used you to get the money to keep it. He doesn't love you, Jasmine. He loves what you can give him." She slumped against the steering wheel, sobbing uncontrollably. The sound of her crying mixed with the drumming of the rain, creating a symphony of misery. "I am so stupid," she choked out. "I signed everything. I gave him everything. He told me I was the only one who believed in him. He told me I was his rock." "You are not stupid," I said, squeezing her hand. "You are loyal. You have a big heart just like your mother. He used that against you. That is what predators do. They find the kindest person in the room and they bleed them dry." She looked at the photos again. The reality was sinking in. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. It was intimate. "He is evil," she whispered. I nodded. Yes, he is. But he is also careless. And he is about to lose. I pulled my hand back. The rain was soaking through my coat, but I didn't care. "Jasmine, listen to me. Tomorrow is the opening of the tower. Do you know about the ground lease?" She shook her head, wiping her eyes. "No." "What ground lease?" "Of course you don't. He kept that from you too. Tomorrow at noon, the land under that tower reverts to me. The building becomes mine. I am going to take it all back, Jasmine. The company, the name, everything." She looked at me stunned. "You own the land." "I always did." "Then why didn't you say anything before?" "Because I needed to see whose side you were on," I said honestly. "And I needed you to see who he really is." She looked at the dashboard. She looked at the papers scattered on the seat, the evidence of her husband's theft, the evidence of his infidelity. "What do I do?" she asked. Her voice was stronger now, harder. "Go home," I said. "Act normal. Do not tell him you saw me. Do not tell him about the photos. Let him think he has won. Let him think he has the money. But he is stealing from me," she said, her hands gripping the steering wheel. "He has already stolen it," I said. "But if you play your part, we can get it back. Can you do that? Can you look him in the eye and lie to him the way he has lied to you for 5 years?" She took a deep breath. She looked in the rearview mirror and wiped the mascara from her cheeks. She fixed her hair. "He destroyed our family," she said. "He made me hate my own father." "Yes," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were red, but they were clear. The fog of gaslighting was lifting. "I can do it," she said. "Good. Tomorrow come to the opening. Stand by his side. Smile for the cameras. And when I walk in, just step aside." "I will," she promised. I stepped back from the car. I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had my daughter back. She was wounded, she was bleeding, but she was back. "Drive safe, Jazzy," I said. "Daddy," she called out just as she was about to roll up the window. "Yes, I am sorry. For everything. For not visiting. For believing him." I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had smiled in years. "We will have time for apologies later," I said. "Right now, we have a war to win." She nodded and rolled up the window. The white Range Rover pulled away into the traffic, disappearing into the gray curtain of rain. I stood there for a moment alone on the sidewalk. I was soaked, I was cold, I was tired, but I felt invincible. Bradley Pierce had made a mistake. He thought he could divide and conquer. He thought he could isolate the daughter to destroy the father. He didn't realize that blood is thicker than water and much thicker than the ink on a stolen check. I turned and walked toward the bus stop. The rain felt different now. It didn't feel like it was hammering me. It felt like it was washing the city clean, preparing it for a new beginning. Tomorrow the storm would break, and Bradley Pierce was going to drown. You cannot build a skyscraper with just money. You can have all the millions in the world, you can have the fanciest architects from New York and the slickest lawyers from Harvard, but at the end of the day, concrete does not pour itself. Steel beams do not fly into the sky on wings of cash. It takes hands to build a tower. Rough, scarred, calloused hands. The hands of men who wake up at 4 in the morning and drink bad coffee and risk their lives hanging 50 stories in the air. Bradley Pierce never understood this. To him, the workers were just line items on a spreadsheet. They were costs to be minimized. They were replaceable parts in a machine he thought he controlled. But I knew them. I knew them because I was one of them. Before I wore a suit, I wore a hard hat. Before I signed checks, I carried rebar. And for 40 years, I made sure that every man who worked on a King construction site was treated with respect. I paid for their kids' braces. I covered their medical bills when the insurance companies tried to deny them. I went to their weddings and I went to their funerals. Bradley thought he stole my company, but he only stole the logo. He didn't steal the army. I sat in the back booth of Big Earl's Rib Shack on 87th Street. The air was thick with the smell of hickory smoke and barbecue sauce. Across from me sat 3 men who looked like mountains carved out of granite. Big Mike, the head of the concrete union, Sal, the foreman of the electrical brotherhood, and Pops Jenkins, who had been running the plumbing crews in this city since before Bradley was born. They looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. They knew I had been to prison. They knew what the papers said, but they also knew the truth because they knew the man. Otis, Big Mike said, his voice rumbling like a cement mixer. "We heard you were back. We heard you were staying quiet. I said, dipping a fry into the sauce. But silence doesn't work with a man like Bradley. He thinks he can treat you like dogs. I heard he cut the overtime pay last week." Sal slammed his hand on the table. He cut the overtime and he cut the safety budget. He switched to cheap harnesses, Otis, cheap Chinese knockoffs. One of my boys slipped yesterday. If that line had snapped, "He won't stop," I said calmly. "He is bleeding money. He needs to finish the Pierce Tower fast, so he is going to push you harder. He is going to cut more corners. He is going to put your lives at risk to save his profit margin." Pops Jenkins leaned forward. "So what do you want us to do, Otis? You want us to walk?" I shook my head. "No. If you walk, he sues the union for breach of contract. He brings in scabs from out of state. We have to be smarter than that. We don't strike." We pause. I slid a piece of paper across the table. It was the report I had sent to the bank, the one about the structural integrity. "This is a safety concern," I said. "Under OSHA regulations and union bylaws, if a worker has a reasonable suspicion that a site is unsafe, they have the right to stop work until a full inspection is conducted. A full inspection." Big Mike picked up the paper and read it. A slow smile spread across his face. "A full inspection," he mused. "That could take days. Maybe weeks if we find irregularities. And while you are inspecting," I said, "nobody works. The cranes stop, the trucks stop, the hammers stop." Pops Jenkins chuckled. "And since it is a safety stand down, he has to pay us while we wait. It is in the contract you wrote 20 years ago, Otis." "Exactly," I said. The next morning at 7 o'clock, Bradley Pierce arrived at the construction site, ready to scream at his project managers to speed up. He stepped out of his black Porsche expecting to hear the roar of machinery. He expected to hear the rhythm of progress. Instead, he heard the wind whistling through the steel girders. Silence. 400 workers were on site. But they weren't working. They were standing in the yard, arms crossed, wearing their hard hats, staring at the building in absolute silence. It was a wall of humanity, a wall of defiance. I wasn't there, but Marcus was watching from the street with his camera. He told me Bradley lost his mind. He ran up to Big Mike screaming until his face turned purple. "Get to work," Bradley yelled. "Why are the cranes not moving? I am paying you to build, not to stand there like statues." Big Mike didn't flinch. He just handed Bradley a clipboard. "Safety concern. Mr. Pierce," Mike said, his voice calm and loud. "We found some anomalies in the foundation concrete. We cannot proceed until we verify the structural integrity of the north face. Safety first. Just like it says in your company handbook." Bradley tore the clipboard out of his hand and threw it on the ground. "This is bullshit," he screamed. "This is a delay tactic. Who put you up to this? Get back to work or you are all fired." Big Mike took a step forward. He towered over Bradley. You can't fire us for following safety protocols, Mike said. And if you try, the union will shut down every single project you have in the tri-state area. We are waiting for the inspectors, Mr. Pierce. Until then, tools down. Bradley looked around. He looked at the hundreds of faces staring back at him. Black faces, white faces, Hispanic faces. Men he had disrespected for 5 years, men he had stolen from. He realized then that he was powerless. He could scream all he wanted, but he couldn't make them lift a hammer. He stormed back to his car, his phone glued to his ear. That day, the Pierce Tower bled. Saul calculated the damages. Between the union wages for the idle workers, the rental fees for the stationary cranes, and the penalty clauses in the delivery contracts, Bradley lost $250,000 by lunchtime. By the end of the week, he would be down over $1 million, and he didn't have $1 million. We had cut off his bank loan, we had cut off his cash flow, and now we had cut off his labor. We were squeezing the air out of his lungs. I spent the day at Marcus's shop organizing the next phase. I felt good. I felt like the general back on the battlefield. But I knew Bradley. I knew that when a rat is cornered, it doesn't surrender. It bites. Night fell over the south side. The shop was quiet. Marcus had gone home to his wife. I was alone in the back office, sleeping on a cot I had set up. I was going over the blueprints of the tower, planning the final blow for the grand opening. I heard the sound of tires on gravel outside. It wasn't a customer. The shop was closed. I sat up and reached for my cane. I didn't have a gun. I never liked guns. But I had a heavy steel wrench on the nightstand. The front door of the shop crashed open. The lock shattered. 3 men walked in. They weren't police. They weren't construction workers. They were muscle. They wore cheap leather jackets and had the dead eyes of men who hurt people for a living. They were the kind of low-level enforcers you hire when you can't afford the professionals anymore. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. I didn't back away. One of them, the biggest one with a scar running through his eyebrow, stepped forward. He held a baseball bat in his hand, tapping it rhythmically against his leg. "Otis King," he said. "I am Otis," I said, my voice steady. "You are trespassing." "Mr. Pierce sends his regards," the man said. "He says you are causing a lot of trouble. He says the noise from the construction site is giving him a headache, and he thinks maybe if you have a headache too, you will stop." "He thinks breaking my legs will start the cranes again," I asked. The man laughed. "No, but it will make him feel better. And maybe you will decide that Florida sounds nice after all." He swung the bat. It smashed into a shelf of spark plugs, sending glass and metal flying. "This is your last warning, old man," the thug hissed, stepping closer. "Call off the strike. Tell your monkey friends to get back to work. Or next time we don't hit the shelf, we hit you." I looked at the bat. Then I looked at the man. "You are making a mistake, son," I said. The man sneered. "The only mistake was you thinking you could fight a rich man. You are nobody. You are just a washed-up ex-con living in a garage." He raised the bat again, preparing for a real swing. I tightened my grip on the wrench hidden behind my back. I was 72, but I still knew how to swing a hammer. If he came at me, I would take out his knee. But then headlights flooded the garage. Bright, blinding high beams cut through the darkness. A truck engine roared. The thugs spun around, shielding their eyes. Marcus hadn't gone home. Or maybe he had come back. The tow truck slammed into the parked SUV of the thugs, pushing it sideways with a screech of metal on metal. The thugs shouted in panic. Marcus jumped out of the cab. And he wasn't alone. From the shadows of the lot, 5 other men stepped out. It was Big Mike. It was Sal. It was the crew. They were holding tire irons and crowbars. They were still wearing their work boots. The thug with the bat looked at me, then at the army of angry construction workers blocking the exit. His confidence evaporated instantly. "You boys look lost," Marcus rumbled, slapping a heavy wrench into his palm. The thug lowered the bat. "We are leaving," he muttered, "just delivering a message." "Deliver this back," I said, stepping forward into the light. "Tell Bradley Pierce that violence is the tool of the incompetent. Tell him that if he sends anyone to my house again, I won't send them back walking." The thugs scrambled into their dented SUV and peeled out of the lot, terrified. Big Mike walked over to me. "Are you okay, Otis?" "I am fine, Mike," I said, lowering my wrench. "Just a little evening entertainment." "He is scared, Otis," Mike said. "He is resorting to street thugs. That means he is out of options. It means he is crumbling," I agreed. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. Bradley had tried to use fear, but he forgot that I had lived in fear for 5 years in a cell. I was immune to it, but he had made a tactical error. By sending these men, he confirmed that he knew I was behind the strike. He confirmed that I was under his skin. And he confirmed that he was no longer a CEO. He was just a gangster in a suit. I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. Go home, boys, I told the crew. Get some rest. Tomorrow the strike continues. And tomorrow we tighten the noose. Bradley wanted a war. He wanted to break me. But as I looked at the loyal men standing around me ready to fight for an old man with nothing but a name, I realized something. I wasn't broken. I was just getting started. And the Pierce Tower was about to become his tombstone. The adrenaline of a fight is a strange thing. It acts like armor protecting you from the pain and the fear while the violence is happening. But the moment the dust settles, the armor falls off and you are just an old man sitting on a tool chest bleeding onto your shirt. I sat in the middle of Marcus's garage holding a bag of frozen peas to my forehead. The cut wasn't deep, but head wounds bleed a lot. The blood had dripped down into my eyebrow and dried there crusted and dark. My ribs ached where I had taken a shove against the shelving unit. Marcus was sweeping up the shattered glass. He moved with a quiet fury. Every sweep of the broom was an accusation. "We have to call the police," Otis, Marcus said without looking up. "This isn't business anymore. This is assault, breaking and entering, attempted murder if that bat had connected." I shook my head, wincing as the movement pulled at my bruised neck. "No police, Marcus," I said. He stopped sweeping and looked at me. "Are you crazy? They trashed my shop. They came to hurt you. If the boys hadn't shown up, I would have handled it," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. "But we do not call the police. You know how this works. Bradley has the best lawyers money can buy. If we call the cops, he spins it. He says we provoked them. He says it was a dispute over an unpaid bill. He ties us up in court for months while his building goes up. So we just let him get away with it?" Marcus asked, gripping the broom handle until his knuckles turned white. "No," I said. "We don't let him get away with anything, but we don't fight him with the law. The law is a slow instrument, Marcus. It is blunt and it is heavy. We need a scalpel. And we need it to cut deep." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the burner phone. It was cracked from the scuffle, but the screen still glowed with a pale blue light. "Bradley thinks he can use force," I said, dialing a number I had memorized 30 years ago. "He thinks he can send thugs to scare me. He forgot that before I was a CEO, I was a foreman. And before I was a foreman, I was a union rep." I held the phone to my ear. It rang 4 times. "Yeah," a deep voice answered. It sounded like gravel crunching under tires. "Mike, it is Otis." "Otis, I heard about the shop. Are you good?" "I am breathing, Mike. But the shop is a mess, and my patience is gone. Say the word, Otis. We can go to his house. We can make sure he never sleeps again. No, Mike, no violence. That is his game. We are going to play my game." I paused, looking at the shattered remains of a headlight on the floor. "I want you to make a call, Mike. I want you to call the suppliers. All of them. The concrete plants. The steel yards. The lumber distributors. Even the guys who sell the portable toilets." "You want a blockade?" Mike asked, his voice lowering. "I want a blackout," I said. "I want King Construction to be radioactive. I want every dispatch manager in Chicago to lose the ticket when they see his address. I want every truck to have a sudden engine failure if it is headed to the Pierce Tower." Mike chuckled, a low rumbling sound. "You want to starve him. I want to suffocate him," I corrected. "As of tomorrow morning, Bradley Pierce does not get a single drop of cement. Not a single screw, not a single pane of glass. Consider it done, Otis. The Brotherhood remembers who paid for the Christmas turkeys in '98. They remember who set up the scholarship fund." I hung up the phone. Marcus was looking at me with wide eyes. "You are shutting down the supply chain," he whispered. I stood up, tossing the bag of melting peas into the trash. "He wants to build a tower," I said. "Let's see him build it with air." The next morning, the sun rose over a city that looked the same as always. Commuters rushed to trains, coffee shops steamed, but in the industrial districts and the yards where the trucks slept, something had changed. Bradley Pierce arrived at his office at 8 a.m. He looked tired. He probably hadn't slept well, wondering if his thugs had done the job. He walked into his executive suite expecting a report that the old man was in the hospital and the strike was over. Instead, he found his project manager, a young man named Kevin, pacing the floor, pulling his hair out. "What is it?" Kevin, Bradley snapped, throwing his coat on the sofa. "Are the workers back?" "No, sir," Kevin stammered. The workers are still standing outside, but that is not the problem. Then what is the problem? It is the concrete, sir. The trucks. They didn't show up. Bradley frowned. What do you mean they didn't show up? We have a pour scheduled for the south ramp today. Call the plant. I did, sir. I called O'Malley Concrete. They said they are out of stock. Out of stock, Bradley laughed. They are a concrete plant, Kevin. How can they be out of concrete? That is what they said. So I called the backup supplier, Miller Mix. They said all their trucks broke down this morning. All of them, sir. 12 trucks. Bradley went still. He walked over to the window and looked down at the street. It was empty. Usually by this time of day there would be a line of mixer trucks waiting to enter the site. Today there was nothing but pigeons. Call the steel guys, Bradley ordered, his voice tight. We need the beams for the 45th floor. I called them, Kevin said, his voice trembling. They said there was a clerical error with our credit line. They put a hold on all deliveries until it is resolved. Bradley turned around slowly. His face was pale. This is impossible, he whispered. This is a conspiracy. He picked up the phone himself. He didn't call the dispatchers. He called the owners. He called men he had played golf with, men he had drank scotch with. Jim, he said, forcing a laugh into the receiver. It is Bradley. Listen, we have a little hiccup with the concrete delivery. He stopped. He listened. His smile faded. What do you mean you can't help? Bradley hissed. I am your biggest client. I spent $4 million with you last year. Jim, don't hang up on me. He slammed the phone down. He won't deliver, Bradley said to the empty room. He said he has labor issues. He said his drivers refused to cross the picket line. He tried another number, and another. Every call was the same. Polite refusals, vague excuses, technical difficulties. It was a wall, a silent, invisible wall that had been erected around his company overnight. Bradley didn't understand it. He had money, or at least the promise of money. He had contracts. In his world, contracts were God. If you had a contract, people had to serve you. He didn't understand that in Chicago, a contract is just paper, but a handshake is bond, and a favor is currency. Otis King had spent 40 years shaking hands. He had spent 40 years doing favors. He had helped the owner of the steel yard when his warehouse burned down. He had bailed the son of the concrete dispatcher out of jail. Bradley had spent 5 years treating these same people like servants. He had squeezed their margins. He had delayed their payments. He had insulted their intelligence. Now the bill was due. Back at the garage, I was sitting in the office listening to the police scanner and drinking coffee. Marcus walked in, grinning from ear to ear. I just got a text from my cousin at the lumber yard, Marcus said. He says Bradley offered double the market rate for a load of plywood, cash on delivery. And I asked. And the boss told him to take a hike, said his wood isn't for sale to rats. I nodded, taking a sip of coffee. He is panicking, I said. He is realizing that money can't buy what he needs. Why doesn't he get it from out of state? Marcus asked. He can try, I said. But concrete has a shelf life, Marcus. You can't truck it in from Indiana. It sets in the barrel. He needs local, and local belongs to us. The blockade held for 3 days. For 3 days, the Pierce Tower stood silent. The cranes didn't move. The dust settled. The unfinished skeleton of the building loomed over the city like a monument to failure. Bradley tried everything. He threatened lawsuits. He tried to bribe drivers directly. He even went on the news claiming he was the victim of a union mafia. But nobody listened. The city of Chicago simply turned its back on him. On the third night, I received a call from an unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. Otis. The voice was slurred. He was drunk. Hello, Bradley. Make it stop, he whispered. Please, make it stop. I can't breathe. The interest payments are eating me alive. The penalties. Otis, please. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I just felt a cold, hard resolve. You sent men to my house, Bradley, I said softly. You tried to hurt me. I was desperate, he sobbed. I didn't mean it. I just wanted you to back off. Why are you doing this? Why do these people listen to you? You are nothing. You are a convict. I am a builder, Bradley, I said. And builders respect builders. You are just a banker in a hard hat. You never respected the trade. You never respected the men. You thought you were a king because you sat in a chair. I will give you money, he pleaded. I will give you a settlement. How much do you want? 5 million. 10. I will wire it tomorrow. Just make the trucks come back. I closed my eyes. He still didn't get it. I don't want your money, Bradley, I said. I told you that at the gate. Keep your money." "Then what do you want?" he screamed. "I want you to look out the window, Bradley. Look at that tower. Look at the ground it sits on. What about it?" he yelled. "Tomorrow is the grand opening," I said. "Get some sleep. You are going to need it." I hung up. He was broken. I could hear it in his voice. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terror of a man falling from a great height. He had tried to use violence, and he had failed. He had tried to use money, and he had failed. Now he was left with nothing but his lies. And tomorrow at noon, even those would be taken away from him. I looked at the calendar on the wall. January 15th. The lease expires in 12 hours. I stood up and walked to the closet where my old suit was hanging. I had retrieved it from storage. It was 10 years old. The lapels were a little wide for modern fashion, but it was clean. It was honest. I brushed the shoulder of the jacket. Tomorrow I wouldn't be the janitor. Tomorrow I wouldn't be the victim. Tomorrow I would be the landlord. And eviction is a nasty business. Desperation has a specific smell. In the construction business, it smells like burnt coffee and stale sweat in a boardroom where the air conditioning has been turned off to save money. It smells like panic. And for the first time in 5 years, that smell was not coming from me. It was wafting from the penthouse office of King Construction. Bradley Pierce was drowning. The Union blockade had choked off his supply lines. The bank freeze had cut off his oxygen. He was sitting in a $50 million hole and the walls were starting to cave in. When a man is drowning, he stops thinking about the future. He stops thinking about legacy or strategy. He only thinks about air. He will drop a bar of gold just to grab a piece of driftwood if he thinks it will keep him afloat for one more minute. I sat in Saul's office watching the digital listings on his laptop screen. It was a cold Tuesday morning and the heater in the corner was rattling, but I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. We had been waiting for this moment. We knew that eventually Bradley would have to liquidate. He had bills to pay. He had hush money to send to his mistress. He had interest payments on the loans he took to build his glass tower. "He needs cash," Saul said, tapping the screen with a yellow pencil. "Fast cash. He can't sell the tower yet because it is not finished. He can't sell the equipment because it is leased. So what does he have left?" "He has the portfolio," I said quietly. "The old portfolio." The portfolio was the heart of the company. It wasn't the flashy skyscrapers or the modern condos. It was the work I had done in the 80s and 90s. The row houses on 35th Street, the community center in Bronzeville, the apartment blocks on Martin Luther King Drive. These were solid brick buildings that housed working-class families. They were not glamorous. They didn't win architectural awards, but they were profitable. They generated steady rent month after month, year after year. They were the engine that had kept the company safe through 3 recessions. Bradley hated them. He called them the slums. He wanted to sell them the day he took over, but the board of directors had stopped him. Now he had fired the board and replaced them with yes men. There was no one left to stop him. "There it is," Saul whispered, pointing at a new notification. I leaned in. A real estate listing had just gone live on the private commercial market. For sale multifamily residential portfolio. South Side. Immediate liquidation. Cash buyers only. I looked at the addresses. My heart skipped a beat. 3500 South Rhodes. 4200 South Michigan. These were my babies. I remembered laying the bricks for the Rhodes building with my own hands during the summer of 1982. I remembered the heat. I remembered the pride. "He is selling the history of the company for scrap," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "He is asking for $6 million, Saul said, reading the price. "That is low. The market value is at least 10. "He is desperate," I said. "He needs the money by Friday to pay the union penalties, or they walk off the job permanently. He doesn't care about the value. He just wants the check." Saul cracked his knuckles. "Then let's write him a check." We had set up a shell company the week before. It was called Red Brick Ventures, registered in Delaware with a blind trust as the owner. To Bradley, it would look like just another faceless investment firm looking to gentrify the neighborhood. He would never dream that the money was coming from the man he tried to destroy. "Make the offer," I told Saul. "Offer him $4 million. "4?" Saul raised an eyebrow. "That is an insult. That is 40 cents on the dollar." "He will take it," I said. "He is not selling real estate, Saul. He is buying time. And time is expensive." Saul typed out the offer. We sat there in silence, watching the cursor blink. The tension in the room was palpable. If Bradley had any sense left, he would reject it. He would realize that these buildings were the only real assets he had left. Selling them was like a starving man eating his own arm. 3 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Bradley's broker. They accepted Saul mouthed to me, covering the receiver. But they want a same-day close. They want the wire transfer in 2 hours. Tell them we can do it, I whispered. But for a quick close, we deduct another $200,000 for administrative fees. Saul suppressed a laugh and relayed the message. He listened for a moment, then hung up. Done, he said. $3.8 million for 6 apartment buildings. You just stole them back, Otis. I didn't smile. I felt a heavy solemnity. I authorized the transfer from the hidden accounts I had accessed through the metal box. The money moved through the digital ether. It traveled from my secret reserves through a maze of banks and landed in the account of King Construction. Bradley would get the notification on his phone. He would see $3.8 million and he would probably cheer. He would think he had won. He would think he had outsmarted the market, dumping off some old crumbling buildings to get the cash he needed to save his precious tower. He didn't realize he had just severed the last artery of the company. Those buildings were the collateral for his operating lines of credit. Once the banks realized they were gone, his credit rating would drop from BBB to junk status overnight. He was plugging a leak in the boat by drilling a hole in the hull. I put on my coat and grabbed my cane. Where are you going? Saul asked, closing the laptop. I am going to inspect my property, I said. I took the bus down to 35th Street. I walked slowly down the block. The buildings stood there sturdy and red against the gray winter sky. They looked exactly as I left them. I walked up to the entrance of the Rhodes building. The brass plate with the King Construction logo was still there by the door, though it was tarnished and dirty. A young woman walked out, pushing a stroller. She looked at me, an old man standing on the sidewalk staring at the brickwork. Can I help you, sir? She asked kindly. Are you looking for someone? No, ma'am, I said, tipping my hat. I am just admiring the masonry. They don't build them like this anymore. That is the truth, she laughed. This building is a tank. My heating bill is low and the walls are thick. It is a good place to raise a family. I watched her walk away. A good place to raise a family. That was all I ever wanted to build. Bradley wanted to build monuments to his own ego. I wanted to build homes. I touched the rough surface of the brick. It was cold and hard, but it felt like flesh and blood to me. I had reclaimed them. They were safe now. Bradley could never touch them again. He could never leverage them. He could never neglect them. They belonged to Otis King again. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. He got the money. He is paying the penalties. The trucks are scheduled to roll tomorrow. I looked up at the sky. Let them roll. Let him spend that money. It was the last money he would ever see. He was throwing it into a black hole. He was paying to finish a building that was already legally mine. I walked to the next building on the block. And the next. I spent the whole afternoon walking the perimeter of my reclaimed kingdom. I felt stronger with every step. I wasn't just an ex-convict anymore. I was a property owner. I was a landlord. I had a foothold in the earth. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the south side, I thought about Bradley sitting in his glass office. He was probably drinking champagne right now. He was probably telling Tiffany that he had pulled a rabbit out of the hat. He was probably laughing at the idiots who bought his old trash buildings. He didn't know that the trash was the treasure. And he didn't know that the check he just cashed was signed by the ghost he feared most. I went back to Marcus's shop that night. The boys were there playing cards. The mood was tense but hopeful. Did you get them? Marcus asked, looking up from his hand. I nodded. Every single brick, Marcus. We own the south side again. Big Mike slammed his fist on the table. That is what I am talking about. That is power. It is ammunition, I said, sitting down. Bradley has cash now. He thinks the strike is over. He thinks he can finish the tower in time for the opening. Let him think that, Marcus grinned. Exactly, I said. We let the trucks through tomorrow. We let him finish the lobby. We let him polish the floors and hang the chandeliers. We let him spend every last dime of that $3.8 million. Why, Big Mike asked. Why not keep squeezing him? Because I want the building finished, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee. It is a nice building, Mike. It will make a beautiful addition to the King Construction portfolio once we evict the tenant. The room went silent as the men realized the scope of the plan. I wasn't just trying to stop him. I was letting him do the work for me. I was letting him sweat and bleed and pay to finish a masterpiece that he would never own. It was cruel. I knew that. It was the kind of cruelty that the old Otis King might have frowned upon. But the old Otis King hadn't spent 5 years in a cage. The old Otis King hadn't been betrayed by his own son. The new Otis King knew that sometimes justice isn't about being fair. It is about being final. I took a sip of the bitter coffee. Tomorrow we let him run, I said. We let him run right off the edge of the cliff. The pieces were all in place. The trap was sprung. The land was mine. The old assets were mine. The daughter was waking up. And the money he thought saved him was actually the rope he would hang himself with. I slept soundly that night. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't dream of prison walls. I dreamed of red bricks and the sound of a gavel coming down hard. The garage was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant wail of a police siren on the Dan Ryan Expressway. It was 2 a.m. I was sitting on the cot in the back office, but sleep was a stranger to me. I was wide awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the plaster. I knew that Bradley had received the wire transfer. $3.8 million had hit his account at 4 o'clock that afternoon. I knew he had immediately paid the union penalties because Big Mike had texted me a thumbs-up emoji. The trucks would roll in the morning. The concrete would pour. The Pierce Tower would get its finishing touches. Bradley was probably celebrating right now. He probably thought he was the smartest man in Chicago. He had turned a pile of old bricks into a lifeline. But I also knew something else about men like Bradley. When they win, they get arrogant. And when they get arrogant, they get cruel. He had been under immense pressure for weeks. Now that the valve was released, the steam had to go somewhere. I heard the sound of a car engine outside. It wasn't the rhythmic idle of a customer. It was the frantic revving of someone in a panic. Tires screeched on the asphalt. A car door slammed. I sat up, grabbing my cane. The heavy metal door of the shop flew open. The wind blew in, carrying dead leaves and the scent of snow. Standing in the doorway, framed by the harsh yellow light of the street lamp, was Jasmine. She wasn't wearing a coat. She was wearing a silk nightgown and a pair of fuzzy slippers that were soaked with mud. Her arms were wrapped around herself, shivering violently. "Jazzy," I whispered, dropping the cane and rushing toward her. She didn't move. She just stood there shaking. As I got closer, I saw it. The left side of her face was red, angry and swollen, a perfect handprint stamped onto her skin like a brand of ownership. The rage that hit me was blinding. It was not the cold, calculating rage I'd felt for 5 years. This was hot. It was volcanic. It was the kind of rage that makes a father want to burn the world down with his bare hands. I reached her just as her legs gave out. I caught her before she hit the greasy floor. She was light, too light. "Daddy," she sobbed, burying her face in my shoulder. "He hit me. He hit me." I held her tight, smoothing her hair while she shook against me. I didn't say anything. There were no words for this. I just held her, letting her cry, letting her release 5 years of poison. "Come inside, baby," I said softly. "Come inside." I led her to the back office and sat her down on the cot. I found an old wool blanket Marcus kept for emergencies and wrapped it around her shoulders. I turned on the electric heater and pulled it close to her frozen feet. I went to the small fridge and got a bag of ice. I wrapped it in a clean towel. "Here," I said, gently pressing it against her cheek. She winced, but she didn't pull away. She looked at me with one eye swollen shut. The other eye was filled with a mixture of shame and terror. "I asked him about the money," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I asked him about the $3 million that came into the account today. I saw the notification on his phone." "You asked him where it came from?" I asked, sitting on the overturned bucket in front of her. "Yes." "I asked him why he sold the buildings on Rhodes Avenue. I recognized the addresses. I told him those were your buildings. I told him you built them with your own hands." I closed my eyes. I could see the scene perfectly. Bradley drunk on victory and maybe scotch, being questioned by the wife he thought he owned. "He laughed at me," Jasmine said. "He said they were just piles of junk. He said he sold them to some stupid investment fund called Red Brick Ventures. He said he fleeced them." "He didn't fleece anyone, Jasmine," I said quietly. "I own Red Brick Ventures. I bought them." She looked at me stunned. You gave him the money." I nodded. "I gave him the rope to hang himself, but I never wanted him to use it on you." She took a shuddering breath. "I told him that. I told him he shouldn't have sold them. I told him that Grandma's trust fund was gone and now the family legacy was gone too. I asked him what happens next. I asked him what happens if the tower fails. And that is when he hit you." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks again. He said I talked too much. He said I was sounding like you. He said he is the king now. And then he just..." swung. He didn't even look sorry. He looked satisfied. I reached out and took her hand. My rough, calloused hand engulfed her small, delicate fingers. "He is not a king," I said, my voice low and hard. "He is a coward. A king protects his kingdom. A king protects his family. Bradley is just a thief in a crown." "Daddy," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "I am so sorry. I believed him. For 5 years I believed him. He told me you were sick. He told me you stole from the pension fund because you were scared of getting old and being poor." It sounded so logical the way he explained it. "It was a good lie, Jasmine," I said. "The best lies always have a grain of fear in them. I was scared of getting old. But I never stole." "I know," she said. "I know that now." She looked around the cluttered, dirty office. She looked at the cot where I slept. She looked at the hot plate where I made my coffee. "You have been living here," she asked, "since the day I got out, and you bought the buildings back." "With what money?" "Money I hid," I said. "Money Bradley couldn't touch." She looked back at me, and for the first time in 5 years I saw my daughter. Not Bradley's wife, not the victim, but the brilliant, sharp woman who used to help me balance the books when she was 12 years old. "He keeps everything on his laptop," she said suddenly. I froze. "What?" "His laptop," she repeated, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "The silver MacBook. He never lets it out of his sight. He takes it to the bathroom. He sleeps with it on the nightstand. But tonight after he hit me, he went downstairs to drink. He left it in the bedroom." "Is it password protected?" I asked. "Yes, but I know it. You know it. I saw him type it in once," she said. "Reflected in the window. He thinks I am stupid, Daddy. He thinks I am just a trophy who cares about spa days and shopping. He doesn't think I pay attention." "What is the password?" I asked, leaning forward. Jasmine looked me straight in the eye. The swelling on her face looked angry, but her voice was steady, cold steel. "Otis King is dead 123. I stared at her. Then I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Of course it is," I said. "He hates me that much." "He is afraid of you," she corrected. "He hates you because he is afraid of you. He knows he can never be half the man you are." She reached into the pocket of her silk robe and pulled out a key fob. "I took the spare key to the house," she said. "He is drunk, Daddy. He passed out on the sofa downstairs. The laptop is upstairs." I looked at the key. It was the key to the house I had built, the house I was thrown out of. "You want me to go get it?" I asked. "No," she said, standing up. The blanket fell from her shoulders. She looked like a warrior queen rising from the ashes of a battlefield. "We are going to get it. Together." "Are you sure, Jasmine? You don't have to go back there. You can stay here. Marcus will protect you." "I am done hiding," she said. "I am done being protected. I want to see his face when you walk in. I want to see him realize that he didn't break me." I stood up and put my hands on her shoulders. I looked into her eyes. "We are not just going to get a laptop," I said. "We are going to get your life back." We walked out to Marcus's truck. I didn't want to take her car. I wanted something heavy, something solid. I drove. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the dark city streets. "Daddy," she said softly as we turned onto the highway. "Yeah, baby. Is it true about the land? Does the building really belong to you tomorrow?" I smiled in the darkness. "At 12 o'clock noon," I said. "When the lease expires, it all comes home." She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "I hope it hurts him. I hope it hurts him more than this." She touched her bruised cheek. I gripped the steering wheel tight. "It will hurt him, I promised. It will hurt him because we are going to take the only thing he actually loves. We aren't taking his money. We aren't taking his building. We are taking his image." We drove in silence the rest of the way. The suburbs were quiet. The houses were dark. We pulled up down the street from the mansion. The lights were off except for the blue glow of the television in the living room. Jasmine handed me the key. "Let's go steal some secrets," she whispered. I took the key. It felt heavy in my hand. It wasn't just metal. It was a weapon. We walked up the driveway together, the old man with a cane and the young woman in a muddy nightgown. We looked like a pair of ghosts. But ghosts are dangerous things, especially when they have nothing left to lose. I put the key in the lock. It turned silently. We stepped into the foyer. The house smelled of expensive cologne and stale scotch. I looked at the living room. I could see Bradley slumped on the leather sofa, his mouth open, snoring loudly. A bottle of Macallan 18 was empty on the table. He looked pathetic. Jasmine didn't look at him. She headed straight for the stairs. I followed her, moving as quietly as my bad knee would allow. We went into the master bedroom. It was huge, opulent, and cold. There on the nightstand, next to the bed where my daughter had slept alone for 5 years, sat the silver laptop. Jasmine picked it up. She didn't hesitate. She opened it. The screen flared to life, illuminating her face. Password prompted. She typed it in, fast, angry. Otis King is dead 123. Click. The screen unlocked. She turned it to me. "We are in," she whispered. I looked at the files on the desktop. Offshore accounts. Bribes. City Hall. Pierce Tower. True cost. It was all there. The digital smoking gun. We didn't just have the building now, we had his freedom. "Let's go," I said, closing the lid. We walked back downstairs. Bradley snorted in his sleep, shifting slightly, but not waking up. Jasmine stopped at the door. She looked back at him. "Goodbye, Bradley," she said softly. We walked out into the night. The air was crisp and clean. I put the laptop in the truck. "You did good, Jazzy," I said. She looked up at me. The bruise on her face was darkening, but her eyes were shining. "I am an Otis," she said. "We don't break, we build." "Yes, we do," I said, starting the engine. "Yes, we do. And tomorrow we are going to build a prison cell for Bradley Pierce." The night before the grand opening of the Pierce Tower, the sky over Chicago was clear and cold. I stood on the roof of my apartment building in the south side, looking north toward the downtown skyline. I could see it from here, the Pierce Tower. It sliced through the darkness like a dagger made of light and glass. It was beautiful. I had to give Bradley that much. He had good taste in architects, even if he had no taste in morality. The building was lit up like a Christmas tree, a beacon of modern luxury that screamed success to anyone who didn't know the rot that lay beneath its foundation. From where I stood, I imagined Bradley was standing in the penthouse right now. I imagined him holding a glass of that expensive scotch he bought with my daughter's inheritance, looking out over the city he thought he had conquered. He was probably laughing. He had survived the strike. He had survived the bank freeze. He had survived the cash flow crisis by selling off my life's work for pennies on the dollar. He thought he had outmaneuvered the old man. He thought the game was over and he had won. But Bradley Pierce was not a builder. He was a gambler. And like all bad gamblers, he didn't know when to walk away from the table. He had pushed all his chips into the center. He had bet his reputation, his marriage, his freedom, and stolen money on this one building. He needed the grand opening to be perfect. He needed to sell 50% of the condos on day one just to pay back the loan sharks and the angry suppliers. He didn't know that the table he was playing on was rigged. I went back downstairs to Marcus's office. The mood was different tonight. There was no pizza. There were no jokes. Saul was there wearing a suit that was actually pressed for once. Jasmine was sitting in the corner clutching a mug of tea, looking pale but determined. Marcus was polishing his boots. It felt less like a construction office and more like a trench before the whistle blows. Saul had the document spread out on the desk. It was the original deed from the metal box. The paper was yellowed and brittle, but the ink was black and permanent. "Read it again, Saul," I said, leaning on my cane. "I want to hear the music." Saul adjusted his glasses. He ran a finger down the page to the section titled Term of Lease. Ground lease agreement, dated January 15th, 2004. Saul read, his voice steady. Between Otis King, hereafter referred to as the lessor, and King Construction Inc., hereafter referred to as the lessee. He paused for effect. The term of this lease shall be for a period of 20 years. Commencing on January 15th, 2004 and terminating at 12:00 p.m. on January 15th, 2024. "Tomorrow at noon," Jasmine whispered. "Exactly," I said. "But Daddy," she asked, looking confused. "Why does Bradley think it is 99 years? Every document in the company computer says 99 years. The banks think it is 99 years. The investors think it is 99 years. I smiled. It was a memory that still made me chuckle, because 20 years ago when we digitized the company records, I hired a temp agency to input the data I explained. The girl who typed in this file was named Brenda. She was 19 and she was bored. She saw ground lease and she assumed it was standard. In Chicago, most ground leases are 99 years. She didn't read the paper. She just typed 99 into the box and hit enter. And you never corrected it, Saul asked, grinning. I tried to, I said. I went to the filing cabinet to pull the original to show her. But then I stopped. I held that paper in my hand and I looked at the young executives I was hiring. I looked at the way the industry was changing. It was becoming less about building and more about greed. And I thought to myself, what if I need an insurance policy? What if one day someone tries to take this company away from me? I looked at Jasmine, so I let the mistake stand in the computer. I took the original document home and locked it in my safe. I told no one, not even your mother. It was my fail-safe. I knew that as long as I was CEO, I would just renew the lease when the time came. It was just a formality. But you aren't CEO anymore, Jasmine said softly. No, I am not. And the current CEO was too arrogant to check the basement archives. He trusted the computer screen because he doesn't respect paper. Saul tapped the document again. And here is the kill shot. Clause 14C, the reversion clause. Read it, I commanded. Upon expiration of this lease without a signed renewal agreement, all improvement structures, fixtures, and developments erected upon the land shall revert to the sole ownership of the lessor, without compensation to the lessee. Without compensation, Jasmine repeated. That means he doesn't get a dime, Saul said. The building, the elevators, the marble in the lobby, the glass in the windows, even the fancy chandelier he just hung, it all belongs to the dirt, and Otis owns the dirt. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. He built a $500 million skyscraper on rented land, I said. And his rent is due. Jasmine stood up. She walked over to me and took my hand. He is expecting me to be there tomorrow, she said. He wants me on stage next to him when he cuts the ribbon. He wants to show the world that we are the perfect power couple. You will be there, I said. You will stand next to him. You will smile. You will let him have his moment in the sun. And then she asked, and then I will walk in, I said. And when I do, you step away from him. You step away like he is on fire. I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. 12 hours. In 12 hours, Bradley Pierce would go from being a real estate mogul to being a trespasser on my property. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness, not for him, but for the waste. He had talent. He had drive. If he had just been honest, if he had just waited his turn, this all could have been his. I would have given it to him. I would have retired and bounced my grandchildren on my knee and watched him build the skyline. But he couldn't wait. He had to steal. He had to cheat. And worst of all, he had to hurt my family. Greed is a funny thing. It makes you blind to the cliff, even when your toes are hanging over the edge. Go home, Jasmine, I said. Get some sleep. You have a performance to give tomorrow. She hugged me tight. I love you, Daddy, she whispered. I love you too, baby. Now go. She left with Marcus, who drove her back to the mansion she would soon be vacating. I stayed in the office with Saul. He poured 2 shots of cheap whiskey into plastic cups. To the long game, Saul said, raising his cup. To the dirt, I replied. We drank. I didn't sleep that night. I spent the hours preparing. I shaved my face clean. I polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in the leather. I took my suit out of the plastic bag. It was old-fashioned, yes. The lapels were wide. The cut was boxy. But it was a suit made of English wool tailored by a man who had been dead for 10 years. It was a suit of substance. Bradley would be wearing Italian silk. He would look sleek and modern, but tomorrow wasn't a fashion show. It was an eviction hearing. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, I felt a calm settle over me. The anger was gone. The resentment was gone. All that was left was the cold mechanics of justice. I thought about the contract. A contract is a promise. It is a bond between men. Bradley had broken every social contract he ever signed. He broke his marriage vows. He broke his fiduciary duty. He broke the bond between father and son. But he could not break the ground lease. That was the beauty of the law. It didn't care if you were rich. It didn't care if you were handsome. It didn't care if you had a mistress in a fur coat. It only cared about what was written on the page. And the page said that at 12:00 p.m. today, Bradley Pierce was finished. I checked my pocket. I had the original deed. I had the lease. And I had a court order signed by a judge. Saul had woken up at 3 in the morning. I was ready. I walked out of the garage and into the morning light. The air was crisp. The city was waking up. I hailed a taxi. "To the Pierce Tower," I said. The driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Big opening today, huh?" he said. "I heard it on the radio. They say it is going to change the skyline." I smiled a slow, dangerous smile. "It is certainly going to change something," I said. We drove toward the tower, toward the inevitable. The trap was not just set. The jaws were already closing. Bradley just hadn't felt the metal cutting into his leg yet. But he would. At noon, he would feel it all. The lobby of the Pierce Tower smelled like new leather and old lies. It was a scent I knew well. It was the smell of money that had not yet been earned but was already being spent. The floors were polished Italian marble that reflected the light of 1,000 crystal bulbs hanging from the ceiling. Waiters in white gloves moved through the crowd like ghosts carrying trays of champagne that cost more per bottle than my first car. I stood outside the revolving glass doors for a moment, watching the spectacle. The wind off Lake Michigan whipped at my coat, but I did not feel the cold. I felt the heat of the moment. Inside, I could see the faces of the city's elite. The mayor was there shaking hands. The bankers who had denied me loans 5 years ago were there laughing at Bradley's jokes. The press was there, cameras flashing, capturing the rise of the new king of Chicago real estate. And in the center of it all, standing on a raised platform near the elevators, was Bradley Pierce. He looked magnificent. I had to give him that. He was wearing a custom navy suit that fit him like a second skin. His hair was perfect. His smile was dazzling. He held a flute of champagne in one hand and a microphone in the other. He looked like a man who had conquered the world. Next to him stood my daughter Jasmine. She was wearing a red dress that looked like blood against her pale skin. She was smiling, but her eyes were dead. She was playing her part perfectly, the trophy wife standing by her successful husband. But I knew that under that red silk her heart was beating in time with mine. I checked my watch. 11:58 a.m. 2 minutes. I turned to the man standing next to me. Sheriff Miller was a giant of a man with a chest like a barrel and a face carved from granite. He was the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. We had fished together on weekends back in the 90s. He knew the truth about my case, but his hands had been tied by the courts. Today, his hands were untied. "Ready, Otis?" the sheriff asked, his voice deep and rumbling. I adjusted my tie. It was a silk tie my wife Clara had bought me for our 30th anniversary. I wore it for luck. "I am ready, Tom," I said. "Let's go eviction hunting." On my other side, Saul Weathers straightened his jacket. He was holding a leather briefcase with both hands like it contained the nuclear codes. In a way, it did. We pushed through the revolving doors. The transition was instant. The noise of the street vanished, replaced by the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. The warmth hit us. We walked into the center of the room. We did not rush. We walked with the heavy, inevitable pace of a glacier. People started to turn. At first, it was just a few glances. Then the whispers started. "Is that Otis King? I thought he was in prison. Why is the sheriff with him?" The crowd parted. It wasn't out of respect, it was out of instinct. When you see a predator walking through the grass, you move out of the way. We cut a path straight through the investors and the politicians toward the platform. Bradley was in the middle of his speech. "This building," he was saying, his voice booming over the speakers, "is more than just steel and glass. It is a testament to resilience. We faced obstacles. We faced delays. But we overcame them because at King Construction we own our destiny." He stopped. He saw me. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he recovered quickly. He was a performer until the end. He lowered the microphone and laughed a sound that was meant to be dismissive but came out brittle. "Well, look who decided to join the celebration," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "My father-in-law, everyone. Give him a round of applause. It is good to see you out and about, Otis. Did you come to see what success looks like?" The crowd chuckled nervously. They were looking at the sheriff. They sensed that this wasn't a social call. I stopped 10 feet from the platform. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. I looked at the man who had taken 5 years of my life. I looked at the man who had hit my daughter. Bradley's smile tightened. "Security," he called out, snapping his fingers. "Please escort Mr. King to the buffet. I am sure he is hungry. And get the sheriff a drink. We are all friends here." 2 security guards started to move toward me. Sheriff Miller didn't even look at them. He just raised one hand, palm out. "Stay back," he ordered. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of the law. The guards froze. Bradley frowned. He looked confused. He stepped down from the platform, leaving Jasmine alone on the stage. He walked toward us, his confidence starting to crack. Sheriff Miller Bradley said, dropping his voice to a hiss. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private event. You can't just barge in here with this convict." "I am not here for the party, Mr. Pierce," the sheriff said coldly. "I am here to execute a court order." Bradley laughed. "A court order? For what? Did I forget to pay a parking ticket?" I stepped forward then. I looked at my watch. 12:00 p.m. Tick, tock. "Your lease is up, Bradley," I said. The room went silent. The music stopped. The waiters stopped moving. Bradley looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "My lease," he scoffed. "What are you talking about, old man? I own this building. I built it." "You built the building," I said, my voice projecting clear and strong to the back of the room. "But you do not own the land it sits on." I nodded to Saul. Saul stepped forward and opened his briefcase. He pulled out the original deed and the ground lease agreement. He held them up. "Ground lease agreement 001, Saul announced, reading from the paper. Dated January 15, 2004. Between Otis King and King Construction. Term of lease 20 years. He looked at Bradley over the rim of his glasses. Expiration date January 15, 2024. At 12:00 p.m. Bradley turned pale. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. "That is a lie," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger. "The records say 99 years. I saw it on the computer. My lawyers saw it. It is 99 years. "Computers can be wrong, Bradley," I said calmly. "Data entry clerks make mistakes. But paper does not lie, and ink does not change." I took the document from Saul and held it out to him. "Read it, Bradley. Read Clause 14C. He snatched the paper from my hand. He scanned it frantically. His eyes darted back and forth. I saw the exact moment his heart stopped. I saw the blood drain from his face, leaving him looking like a wax figure. "No," he whispered. "This is a forgery." "You forged this." Sheriff Miller stepped in. "The document has been authenticated by the court, Mr. Pierce," the sheriff said. "Judge Reynolds signed the eviction order this morning. The lease is valid. The term has expired. And the reversion clause," Saul added, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Upon expiration, all structures and improvements revert to the owner of the land." Bradley dropped the paper. It fluttered to the marble floor, landing softly at his feet. He looked around the room. He looked at the investors who were now pulling out their phones, calling their lawyers. He looked at the bankers who were backing away toward the exits. "You can't do this," he screamed, his voice cracking. "I spent $500 million on this tower. It is mine." "It was yours," I corrected, "until a minute ago. Now it is a trespass on my property." I pointed to the door. "Get out, Bradley." "No," he roared. "No, this is my building security. Throw them out." Nobody moved. The security guards were looking at the sheriff. The guests were looking at the floor. Bradley turned to the stage. He turned to the one person he thought he still controlled. "Jasmine," he yelled. Tell them this is insane. Tell them we own this." Jasmine stood on the platform looking down at him. She looked beautiful and terrible, like an avenging angel. She picked up the microphone. Bradley waited, expecting her to defend him, expecting her to lie for him one last time. Jasmine looked him in the eye. "It is over, Bradley," she said. Her voice was amplified, echoing through the cavernous lobby. She stepped off the platform. She didn't walk toward him. She walked toward me. She came to my side and took my arm. She looked at the sheriff. "My husband is trespassing, officer," she said. "Please remove him." Bradley made a sound that wasn't human. It was the sound of a wounded animal. He lunged toward us, his hands reaching for my throat. "You ungrateful bitch," he screamed. "I made you." Sheriff Miller moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. He stepped in front of me and caught Bradley by the lapels of his expensive suit. He slammed him back against a marble pillar. "Bradley Pierce, you are under arrest," the sheriff said. "Arrest?" Bradley gasped, struggling against the grip. "For what? Trespassing is a misdemeanor." "For trespassing, yes," the sheriff said, spinning him around and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. The metal clicked shut, echoing loudly in the silent lobby. "But also for embezzlement," Saul piped up, holding up another file. "And for wire fraud. And for grand larceny involving the theft of the Rhodes Avenue properties. We have the logs from your laptop, Bradley. Jasmine gave us the password. Bradley froze. He stopped struggling. He looked at Jasmine. You, he whispered. You stole my laptop. I took back my life, Jasmine said coldly. The sheriff hauled him upright. Let's go, Mr. Pierce. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it. They dragged him toward the door. The same revolving door he had walked through as a king, he was now exiting as a prisoner. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted questions. Mr. Pierce, is it true you lost the building? Mr. Pierce, did you steal from your own wife? I watched him go. I watched the man who had tried to bury me be dragged out into the cold. When the doors stopped spinning, the lobby was deathly quiet. I looked around at the crowd, the elite of Chicago, the people who had watched me fall and done nothing. I walked to the platform. I climbed the stairs, my bad knee aching but holding strong. I picked up the microphone Bradley had dropped. I tapped it twice. Ladies and gentlemen, I said. They looked up at me. My name is Otis King. I paused, letting the name sink in. I apologize for the interruption, but there has been a change in management. I looked at the bankers in the front row. This building is now under new ownership. If you have business with the Pierce Tower, I suggest you call my lawyer. His name is Saul Weathers. I pointed to Saul, who waved cheerfully. However, I continued looking at the buffet tables laden with food. I hate to see good food go to waste, and I hate to see a party end early. So please, stay, eat, drink. I smiled a genuine warm smile. Consider it a celebration of justice. I put the microphone down. I walked down the stairs to where Jasmine was waiting. She was crying silent tears of relief. We did it, Daddy, she whispered. I put my arm around her. We did it, baby. I looked up at the ceiling, at the chandeliers, at the soaring glass walls. It was a magnificent building, and now it was finally built on solid ground. Let's go, I said. Where, she asked. To the kitchen, I said. I want to thank the staff. They are the ones who really built this place. We walked away from the stunned crowd, leaving them to their whispers and their champagne. Outside, the sirens were fading into the distance, carrying Bradley Pierce to the same cell block I had just left. The balance was restored, the check was paid, and the king was back on his throne. The sound of a man laughing when he is standing on a trapdoor is a sound you never forget. It is a hollow, confident sound that echoes off the walls and bounces back to mock him. Bradley Pierce was laughing at me. He was standing on the marble podium of the building he had sacrificed his soul to build, and he was laughing at the man who owned the ground beneath his feet. You are insane, Otis, Bradley shouted, his voice amplifying over the sound system. You have finally lost it. Prison rot has eaten your brain. This is my building. My name is on the door. My money paid for the steel. My sweat paid for the concrete. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms wide like a conductor leading an orchestra. I apologize, everyone, he said, flashing that $1,000,000 smile. My father-in-law is confused. He thinks it is 20 years ago. He thinks he still matters. He pointed a manicured finger at the security guards who were hesitating by the door. I said get him out, Bradley screamed, his smile vanishing instantly, replaced by the snarl of a cornered dog. Drag him out. Throw him in the street where he belongs. The guards looked at Sheriff Miller. The sheriff just shook his head once. A subtle movement, but it was enough. The guards took a step back. They knew who held the real power in this city, and it wasn't the man in the shiny suit. Bradley saw them retreat. His face turned a shade of red that clashed with his navy tie. Fine, he spat. I will do it myself. He stormed down the stairs of the stage. He was coming for me. He was going to put his hands on me in front of the press, in front of the investors, in front of God and everyone. But before he could reach me, a voice cut through the air like a razor blade. Read the document, Saul. It was my voice. Calm, steady, the voice of a foreman giving an order over the roar of a jackhammer. Saul Weathers stepped forward. He didn't look like a disbarred lawyer working out of a basement anymore. He looked like the Grim Reaper in a pinstripe suit. He opened the leather folder in his hands. The paper inside was old. It crinkled as he unfolded it. The sound was quiet, but in that silent lobby it sounded like a gunshot. Ground lease agreement number 001. Saul read, his voice projecting to the back of the room. Dated January 15th, 2004, between Otis King Lessor and King Construction Lessee. Bradley stopped 10 feet away from me. He froze. What is this garbage? He hissed. Clause 3, term of lease. Saul continued, ignoring him. The term of this agreement shall be exactly 20 years commencing on the date of signing and terminating at 12 noon on January 15th, 2024. He looked at his watch. It is now 12:05, Saul said. Bradley rolled his eyes. He looked at the investors who were watching with confusion. So what, he laughed nervously. So the lease expired 5 minutes ago. Big deal. It is a clerical error. It is supposed to be 99 years. We will renew it tomorrow. We will pay the administrative fee. You think you can stop a $500 million project because of a typo? It is not a typo, Bradley, I said, stepping closer to him. It was an insurance policy. Read Clause 14C, Saul, I commanded. Saul cleared his throat. This was the moment. This was the blade coming down. Clause 14C, the reversion clause. Saul read slowly, enunciating every syllable. Upon the expiration of this lease, if no renewal agreement has been signed by both parties, all improvements, structures, fixtures, and developments erected upon the parcel of land shall revert to the sole ownership of the lessor, without compensation to the lessee. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash before the screaming starts. Bradley blinked. He looked at Saul. He looked at me. He looked at the towering glass walls of the lobby. "What did you say?" he whispered. I said, "Without compensation," Saul repeated, snapping the folder shut. "It means you don't get paid, Bradley. It means the building is no longer yours." Bradley shook his head violently. No, that is impossible. I built this. I took out the loans. I signed the contracts. This is my property. You own the debt, Bradley. I said, my voice low and hard. You owe the banks $500 million. You owe the suppliers. You owe the unions. But the asset, the physical building, the glass, the steel, the marble you are standing on, that belongs to the land. I tapped the floor with my cane, a sharp hollow sound. And I own the land. Bradley staggered back as if I had punched him. He looked at the bankers in the front row. The men from First City Bank, their faces were white. They were pulling out their phones, frantically dialing their legal teams. They understood. They understood instantly that their collateral had just evaporated. "This is theft," Bradley screamed, spinning around. "You are stealing my building. I am not stealing anything I said. You gave it to me. You spent 5 years building a palace on land you didn't own. You spent 5 years pouring money into a hole that belonged to me. You just built me a billion-dollar skyscraper for free, Bradley. And you even paid for the opening party." "Thank you." The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a ghost. He looked at the banner hanging above the stage. The Pierce Tower. It wasn't his tower, it was his tombstone. He turned to his lawyer, a young man in a cheap suit who was looking at the floor. "Tell him," Bradley shrieked, grabbing the lawyer by the lapels. "Tell him he is wrong. Tell him about the 99 years. The lawyer gently removed Bradley's hands. "Sir," the lawyer stammered, "if the original document says 20 years, and it wasn't renewed. The reversion clause is standard. It is ironclad. We don't have a leg to stand on." Bradley let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. He looked at the crowd, the people he had tried to impress, the people he had lied to. They weren't looking at him with admiration anymore. They were looking at him with disgust. They were looking at a man who had just committed the biggest unforced error in the history of Chicago real estate. Robert Sterling, the investor, I had warned at the gala, stood up. "You told us you owned the land fee. Simple!" Robert shouted, his face purple with rage. "You showed us the digital records." "I thought I did," Bradley pleaded, holding his hands out. "It was in the computer. It said 99 years. "You didn't check the vault," Robert yelled. "You didn't check the paper. You incompetent fraud. I want my money back. I want my $50 million back right now. I don't have it." Bradley cried, tears streaming down his face. "It is in the walls. It is in the building that belongs to Mr. King." Robert spat. The lobby erupted. It was chaos. Bankers were shouting. Investors were pushing forward. The press was having a field day, the flashes of their cameras blinding and relentless, capturing every second of Bradley's disintegration. He looked around wild-eyed, looking for an escape, looking for an ally. He saw Jasmine. She was standing next to me, her hand on my arm. She looked strong. She looked like a queen. "Jasmine," he begged, falling to his knees. He actually fell to his knees right there on the polished marble. "Jasmine, please. Talk to him. He is your father. Tell him to stop. We can work this out. We can be partners. I will give him half." Jasmine looked down at him. There was no pity in her eyes, only a cold, distant recognition of a stranger. "You don't have half to give Bradley," she said, her voice amplified by the acoustics of the room. "You have nothing. You signed away my trust fund. You embezzled the company accounts. You mortgaged a house that isn't yours." She reached into her purse and pulled out a ring, her wedding ring, a large diamond that he had bought with stolen money. She dropped it. It hit the marble with a tiny ping that sounded louder than his screaming. "I am filing for divorce," she said, "and I am testifying for the prosecution." Bradley stared at the ring. He looked up at me. He looked at the man he had framed, the man he had sent to prison to die. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you wait? Why did you let me finish it?" "Because I wanted you to feel it," I said, leaning down so only he could hear. "I wanted you to feel what it is like to build a life and have it taken away in a single second. I wanted you to know how it feels to be framed by your own arrogance." I stood up straight and looked at the sheriff. "Get this trespasser off my property." Sheriff Miller stepped forward and hauled Bradley to his feet. Bradley was limp. He didn't fight. The fight had left him the moment the clause was read. He was a shell. A man who had flown too close to the sun on wings made of stolen wax. As they dragged him away, passing the buffet tables, passing the ice sculptures, passing the life he thought he deserved. The room fell silent again. I looked at the crowd. I looked at the terrified bankers. I stepped up to the microphone. I adjusted my tie. "The Pierce Tower is closed," I said, my voice calm. I looked up at the ceiling, at the soaring heights of the atrium. "Welcome to the King Tower." And then, for the first time in 5 years, I let out a breath that I had been holding since the day the handcuffs clicked on my wrists. It was over. The payoff wasn't the money. The payoff wasn't the building. The payoff was the look in his eyes when he realized that the old man he threw away was the one holding the deed to his soul. I turned to Jasmine. "Let's go get some lunch," I said. "I think I am finally hungry." The crowd parted for us as we walked out. Not out of fear this time, but out of respect. The king had returned, and his castle was finally complete. The walk from the revolving doors of the lobby to the curb was only 50 feet, but for Bradley Pierce it must have felt like the Baton Death March. The flashbulbs were blinding, popping like mortar fire in a war zone. The reporters were shouting questions that sounded like accusations. They were asking about the fraud. They were asking about the mistress. They were asking about the stolen trust fund. But the loudest voices were not the reporters. They were the men in the expensive suits who had been drinking his champagne 5 minutes ago. Robert Sterling, the investor who had demanded his $50 million back, was following us out. He wasn't walking with the dignity of a banker anymore. He was red-faced and spitting with rage. "You are finished," Pierce Sterling screamed, his voice cracking. "I am going to sue you for every penny. I am going to take your house. I am going to take your car. I am going to take the fillings out of your teeth." Behind him were the representatives from First City Bank. They looked terrified. They knew that when they went back to their office, they would be fired for lending $50 million on a building with no land rights. Their fear turned into viciousness. They were shouting at the sheriff, telling him to make sure Bradley didn't hide assets, telling him to freeze everything. And then there were the others. As we stepped out into the freezing Chicago air, I saw a black SUV parked across the street. It wasn't a police car. It wasn't a news van. It had tinted windows, and the engine was idling with a low, menacing rumble. Bradley saw it too. He stopped dead in his tracks. The sheriff tugged on his arm, but Bradley dug his heels into the slush. His eyes went wide with a terror that had nothing to do with the law. He recognized the car. It belonged to the loan sharks, the men he had borrowed from to pay the union penalties. The men who didn't file lawsuits but broke kneecaps. They knew. Bad news travels fast in the underworld. They knew the building was gone. They knew their collateral was gone. And they were waiting. "Oh, God," Bradley whispered. "Oh, God, don't let them get me. Sheriff, please put me in the car. Put me in the car right now." He was actually begging to be arrested. He realized that a jail cell was the only place on earth where he was safe from the consequences of his own greed. But the sheriff didn't hurry. He moved with a slow, deliberate pace, forcing Bradley to walk past the line of spectators. And there at the curb waiting for me was not a taxi. It was Marcus's tow truck. It was big and ugly and covered in road salt. It was the same truck that had saved me from the thugs. It was the chariot of the working man. Marcus was leaning against the fender, arms crossed, smiling a smile that showed all his teeth. Next to him stood Jasmine. She had walked out ahead of us. She was wearing her coat now wrapped tight against the wind, looking at her husband with eyes that were dry and clear. Bradley saw us. He saw the tableau. Me, the old convict in my vintage suit. Jasmine, the liberated wife. Marcus, the loyal friend. Something inside him snapped. The reality of his situation crashed down on him. The loss of the money was one thing, but the loss of the image was what killed him. He was no longer the golden boy. He was a fraud exposed in front of the entire city. He lunged. He ripped his arm free from the sheriff's grip. For a second, the sheriff let him go. I think he knew what was coming. I think he wanted Bradley to have this final moment of humiliation. Bradley ran toward me. He didn't run like a man attacking. He ran like a child seeking shelter. He slipped on the ice. His Italian leather shoes had no traction on the slick pavement. He went down hard. He hit the slush with a wet thud that made the crowd gasp. He scrambled on his hands and knees. His navy suit, the one that cost $5,000, was instantly soaked with gray, freezing mud. He looked up at me. His hair was matted to his forehead. His face was streaked with tears and snot. It was the exact reverse of the day I got out of prison. That day I had stood in the cold with a plastic bag while he leaned against his warm car. Now he was in the mud, and I was standing on the high ground. Otis, he choked out, crawling a few inches closer to my shoes. Otis, wait. Please. I looked down at him. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt a deep, profound pity. It is a terrible thing to see a man stripped of his dignity, even if he deserves it. Dad, he sobbed, using the word he hadn't used in 5 years. Dad, listen to me. I can fix this. We can fix this. There is no we, Bradley, I said, my voice calm over the clicking of the cameras. Please, he begged, reaching out a hand to grab my pant leg. I pulled my leg back, not wanting his dirt on my clean wool. I was wrong, he cried. I was stressed. I made mistakes. But I did it for the family. I did it for Jasmine. You know how it is. You know the pressure. Don't you dare, I said. Don't you dare blame your greed on my daughter. I am sorry, he screamed, his voice breaking into a high-pitched wail. I am sorry for everything. I will sign the company back to you. I will give you the house. I will do anything. Just tell the sheriff to let me go. Tell the investors it was a misunderstanding. Please, Dad, give me a chance. He was hyperventilating now. I am family, he whispered. Doesn't that mean anything? Give me one chance. I looked at him kneeling in the snow. I looked at the crowd watching us. I looked at the building towering above us. My building. I took a step closer. I leaned down so our faces were level. I gave you a chance, Bradley, I said softly. He looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I gave you 5 years, I said. The hope died. I gave you 5 years while I sat in a cage. Every day of those 5 years was a chance. Every time you forged a signature was a choice. Every time you hit my daughter was a choice. Every time you mocked me was a choice. I stood up straight, towering over him. The opportunity you are asking for, Bradley, I gave it to you a long time ago, but you didn't use it to build a bridge. You used it to dig a grave. I pointed to the sheriff. And now it is time to lie in it. Bradley let out a scream of pure despair. It wasn't a word. It was just a sound. The sound of a soul breaking. The sheriff stepped forward and hauled him up by the back of his coat. Bradley was limp. He couldn't stand. They had to drag him toward the waiting squad car. His feet dragged through the slush, leaving 2 long lines in the snow. Jasmine, Jasmine, help me, he moaned as they stuffed him into the back seat. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't look away. She watched until the door slammed shut. The sound of the heavy metal door closing was the final period on the sentence of his life. The squad car lights flashed red and blue, reflecting off the glass of the King Tower. Robert Sterling and the other bankers were screaming at the sheriff's deputies, demanding to know where Bradley was being taken, demanding to file liens against his assets. The mob SUV peeled away, disappearing into traffic to find another way to collect their debt. It was over. I turned to Marcus. Get the truck, I said. I think we are done here. Marcus opened the door for me. I climbed into the cab. The seat was torn vinyl and it smelled of old coffee, but it felt like a throne. Jasmine climbed in the middle, sitting between us. She rested her head on my shoulder. Are you okay, baby? I asked. She took a deep breath. I will be, she said. I finally feel light. I looked out the window as we pulled away. The crowd was still milling around the entrance of the tower, confused and excited. I saw the $100 bill Bradley had thrown at me the night of the gala in my mind. I saw his arrogant smile, and then I saw him on his knees in the mud. My grandmother used to say that the higher a monkey climbs, the more you see his behind. Bradley had climbed to the very top, and the whole world had seen exactly who he was. I patted Jasmine's hand. "Let's go home," I said. "Not the mansion, not the penthouse, but home. The place where the bricks are real and the people are loyal." As we drove away from the glistening tower, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew it would be there tomorrow, and the day after that, and 99 years after that, because it was built on my land, and I wasn't going anywhere. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers reflecting off the glass facade of the tower were the only fireworks Bradley Pierce ever got. He didn't get his grand finale, he didn't get his applause, he got the cold, hard reality of federal justice. As the sheriff was dragging him toward the local squad car, a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Two men in dark suits stepped out. They didn't look like local cops. They moved with the quiet, terrifying authority of the FBI. They intercepted the sheriff. "We will take it from here, Sheriff," one of the agents said, showing his badge. Bradley looked at them, his eyes widening in a new kind of panic. "FBI," he stammered. "Why is the FBI here? I just trespassed. It is a local matter." The agent didn't smile. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. It wasn't an eviction notice. It was a federal indictment. "Bradley Pierce, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement of corporate funds across state lines. We have the logs from your laptop. We have the transfer records to Diamond Sky LLC. And we have a witness willing to testify to your coercion tactics." Bradley looked around frantically. "Who? Who is the witness?" Jasmine stepped forward. She stood next to me, wrapped in her coat, looking like the Statue of Liberty in the snow. "I am," she said clearly. Bradley stared at her. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The betrayal he felt was ironic, considering he had spent 5 years betraying everyone who ever loved him. The agents handcuffed him. These weren't the comfortable cuffs of a county jail. These were federal restraints. They put him in the back of the sedan. He didn't scream this time. He didn't beg. He just slumped against the window, watching his life disappear. As the car pulled away, merging into the traffic of the city he wanted to own, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Saul. "He is gone," Otis Saul said. "With the evidence on that laptop and the violation of the banking acts, he is looking at 20 years minimum. He will be an old man when he gets out." "Older than me," I said. I looked up at the King Tower. My tower. The lights were still on. The party inside had stopped, but the building itself was alive. It was breathing. "What do we do now?" Saul asked. "Do you want to go up to the office? Do you want to sit in the CEO chair?" I thought about it. I thought about the mahogany desk. I thought about the view of the lake. I thought about the power that came with that chair. 5 years ago, I would have run up those stairs. I would have wanted to reclaim my throne. But I wasn't the same man anymore. Prison changes you. It strips away the vanity. It makes you realize that a chair is just furniture and a view is just a window. "No, Saul," I said. "I don't want the chair." "Then who runs the company?" Saul asked, surprised. I looked at the crowd of employees standing by the entrance. The waiters, the security guards, the junior architects who had been terrorized by Bradley for years. "We hire the best," I said. "We bring in a professional management team, people who know how to build, not just how to borrow. I will stay on as chairman of the board. I will own the land. I will protect the vision. But I am done with the daily grind. I have other work to do." "What work?" Saul asked. I looked at Jasmine. "Repair work," I said. The next few weeks were a blur of activity, but it was the good kind of activity. It was the work of cleaning up. We evicted the ghost of Bradley Pierce from the company. We fired his cronies. We rehired the old guard. We paid the suppliers what they were owed with interest. But the most important thing happened a month later. I stood in the lobby of the tower. The portrait of Bradley that had hung behind the reception desk was gone. In its place was a simple bronze plaque, the Clara King Foundation. I had taken the profits from the Rhodes Avenue buildings, the money I had made by betting against Bradley, and I had started a fund. It wasn't for building skyscrapers, it was for building people. It provided scholarships for kids from the South Side who wanted to study engineering and architecture. It provided legal aid for the elderly who were being exploited by predatory developers. It was my wife's legacy. It was the heart that Bradley had tried to cut out of the company. Jasmine was named the director of the foundation. She threw herself into the work with a passion I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. She wasn't just signing checks. She was visiting schools. She was talking to students. She was finding her voice again. One evening, 6 months after the arrest, I drove my old truck down to the South Side. I pulled into the parking lot of Big Earl's Rib Shack. The neon sign was buzzing. The smell of smoke and spices filled the air. It was a million miles away from the gala at the Palmer House. There were no chandeliers here, just plastic tablecloths and paper napkins. I walked in. Jasmine was already there, sitting in a booth in the back. She wasn't wearing a red dress or diamonds. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. Her hair was loose. She looked younger. She looked free. "Hey, Dad," she smiled, waving a rib at me. "You are late. The cornbread is getting cold." I sat down opposite her. My bad knee was aching a little less these days. "I was stopping by the site," I said. "The new safety protocols are in place. Big Mike is happy." "That is good," she said. She pushed a basket of ribs toward me. "I visited him today," she said quietly. I stopped. I didn't have to ask who. "Bradley." "How is he?" I asked, taking a bite of cornbread. "He is adjusting," she said. "He is working in the prison library. He sorts books. He told me he hates the dust." I chuckled. "The man who hated dust is now living in it. God has a sense of humor." "Did he ask for anything?" I asked. "He asked for money," she said. "He asked if I could put money on his commissary account so he could buy better shampoo." "And what did you say?" Jasmine wiped her mouth with a paper napkin. She looked me in the eye. The fear that used to live in her pupils was gone. "I told him that the trust fund is gone," she said. "I told him that every penny I earn now goes to the foundation. I told him that if he wants shampoo, he can work for it, just like you did." I smiled. "That is my girl." We ate in silence for a while. The restaurant was noisy, filled with laughter and the sound of Motown on the jukebox. It was real. It was honest. "You know, Dad," she said suddenly, "I used to think we lost everything. When the scandal hit, when he was arrested, I thought our name was ruined. I thought we would never recover. And now," I asked. She looked around the humble restaurant. She looked at the people eating and laughing. She looked at me, her father who had walked through fire to save her. "Now I think we have everything," she said. "We have the truth. We have each other. And we sleep at night." "Yes, we do," I said. I looked at my hands. They were old hands, scarred hands, but they were clean hands. I had spent my whole life building things. Walls, roofs, towers. But the hardest thing I ever had to build was a second chance. And sitting there sharing a meal with my daughter, I realized that the foundation of that second chance was stronger than any concrete I had ever poured. Bradley Pierce was in a cell dreaming of the millions he lost. I was sitting in a rib shack feeling like the richest man in the world. The waiter came over to refill our iced teas. He was a young kid, maybe 18. He looked at me. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Mr. King?" "Otis King." "I am son," I said. "My mom lives in the Rhodes building," the kid said. "The rent didn't go up this year. She said the new owner froze it. She said she can finally afford to send me to community college because of that. I just wanted to say thank you." I looked at the kid. I looked at Jasmine, who was beaming with pride. "You are welcome, son," I said. "Study hard. We might have a job for you when you graduate." The kid walked away grinning. I leaned back in the booth. This was it. This was the payoff. Not the applause of the bankers, not the envy of the rivals. It was the quiet respect of a neighbor. It was the safety of a home. It was the dignity of knowing that you own the ground you stand on. I raised my plastic cup of iced tea. "To the dirt," I said. Jasmine raised hers, clinking it against mine. "To the dirt," she agreed. We finished our meal. We walked out into the cool night air. The city of Chicago stretched out before us, a vast ocean of lights. Somewhere in that ocean was a tower with my name on it. But right here, right now, standing on the cracked sidewalk of the South Side, I felt more at home than I ever had in any penthouse. I unlocked my truck. "See you Sunday for dinner?" Dad, Jasmine asked. "I will be there," I said. "I will bring the dessert." I watched her drive away. I got into my truck and started the engine. It roared to life, a solid, dependable sound. I drove home. Not to a mansion, but to a home. My name is Otis King. They tried to bury me, but they forgot that I am a seed, and the harvest is finally here. The carpenter's rule. You can build a skyscraper that touches the clouds, but if you don't own the dirt beneath it, you're just renting the view. Bradley mistook silence for weakness, and gray hair for obsolescence. He forgot that the man who laid the first brick knows exactly where to pull to bring the whole wall down. True power isn't in the noise you make or the suits you wear, it's in the foundation you build when no one is watching. Never underestimate the architect of your fortune, especially when you're standing on his land. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments which city you are watching from, and tell me if you have ever had to rebuild your life from the ground up. I read every comment, and I would love to hear your story. See you in the next video.